silence and to the flag. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could I have roll call, please?
First. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Commissioner Grabowski?
Here.
Commissioner Lang?
Here.
Commissioner Belt?
Here.
Trustee Roberts?
Here.
President Knudsen?
Yes.
And Commissioner Mance is on her way, and Commissioner Hoff is excused.
Right. Okay, we have two public hearings this evening. The first one is on a conditional use grant request to property owner applicant Waukesha County Technical College, WCTC, to modify the permitted operating hours for the outdoor driving training facility located on their campus at 800 Main Street, PWV 0926-99001 and PWV 0926-997. This campus property is zoned IPS Institutional and Public Service District. I hereby open up the public hearing. Is there anybody here that would like to make a comment as it relates to that? Yes, in the back. Yes, please come up and use the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Sure. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak to you. I am Matt Beeble. I live at W260N2832 Steeplechase Drive. I've lived there for 15 years with my family. To get a picture of where I live, my home sits on the eastern edge of Steeplechase subdivision. There's approximately 10 houses that abut the WCTC facility that you referenced. I came to the previous meeting when this was initially presented, and a noise and sound study was done. And that, I'm just going to paraphrase, but that noise and sound study basically said the noise generated would be consistent with that currently exists in the neighborhood. Now, after living through the last 3 years, studies in medicine and everything else can tell you anything you want to know, and then a year later, they'll be different. So every study has its own way. Now, we've lived there for a long time now. I've been, like I said, there for 15 years. Noise is really a human experience. There's three things that go with noise: how loud it is, how often it occurs, and when it occurs. So first of all, how loud is it? So the study said it was consistent with what's going on in the subdivision on a daily basis. I can tell you that living there, it sounds exactly like the John's garbage trucks that pick up your garbage every day. Now those guys whip through the subdivision in about 30 minutes and they leave, and I can hear them a block away because sometimes I forget to take my garbage out, and on Thursdays I'll hear the truck and I'll go running out and bring my stuff out. It's like, oh, because I can hear them on Deerhaven Drive, which is my house across Steeplechase, a house, backyard, and then Deerhaven Drive. So I can hear them, pretty far away. That's with the windows closed, by the way. So anyways, so these trucks, though, go around the track and they make noise like the John's garbage truck. Now, every once in a while, you'll get the old rumbling of the truck and then a bang. Well, there's a curb there that they hit, and if they go over it too fast, the back ends of the trucks are pretty light because there's nothing in them. So the back wheels slam down. So you get this rumble, 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 bang. That occurs about every 3 minutes when they're running their trucks. It's pretty loud. You can hear it in the house. Secondly, so that's the first thing is that's how loud it is. Secondly, it's how often. About every 3 minutes. It's not like the John's garbage truck coming through on a Thursday. You know they're there. The school buses come through. You know they're there. Thirdly, it's the time. This is what you guys are talking about today. They drive there between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. on weekdays, and on Sundays they give us a little break. They go from 8 to 5. So if I have a birthday party in my backyard, I can hear the trucks going around, rumble, 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 bang. And sometimes they're there, sometimes they aren't, but I can't schedule a birthday party or whatever, family gathering around that. So you're proposing that they go 12 hours a day now, right? They're at 12 hours now. You're proposing 16 hours a day. They want to go 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Saturday and keep it the same on Sundays. So that's basically gives us 8 hours of quiet during the week. Now, that's not bad, but that truck noise actually wakes me up in the middle of the night. Now, I'm old. I'm 55, so the amount of sleep I need 7 to 8 hours a day. Now, I know that because I'm a physician also, and I'm an engineer also. Kids, if you're a 5-year-old, 4-year-old, you need 12 to 13 hours of sleep a night, okay? They're gonna be making noise back there they're gonna be quiet for 8 hours a day. They're gonna be noisy for 16, according, if you let this go through. So a couple of thoughts. 2 things. If there was a Target distribution center on the back end of Broken Hill, would you let them operate from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.? Or would you limit that based on the people in that subdivision? Lastly, I would challenge everybody on this board to go out and cut your lawn at 6 a.m. this summer and do it every day for a couple months and see the kind of looks you get from your neighbors or the neighbors who come and talk to you. Maybe try going and cut it at 9 o'clock at night. You know, to me, it's all about being a good neighbor, and nobody in my neighborhood cuts their lawn at 6 in the morning. I wait till 9 o'clock. I would never cut it in the evening when my neighbors are putting their kids to bed. So, like I said, there's a lot of people in Milwaukee, 99% of them try to be good neighbors, and we're trying to be good neighbors but having this noise in our backyard, it's only about 10 houses, and then if you count the people across the street, maybe 20. But that's not being a good neighbor. There's no way that they should be running those trucks at 6 in the morning. Some people sleep in, you know, and some people, my wife goes to bed at 8:30 at night because she's got to get up early in the morning to go to work. I mean, those trucks are going to be running at 10 o'clock at night, and you can hear them in our house. Appreciate the time that you've given me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment as it relates to this topic? No? Okay, then I'm going to close that public hearing. Thank you for your comments, sir. Item B, public hearing is a conditional use grant request of property owner Kirkland Crossings, Inc. to develop an 84-unit housing for the elderly building project on the vacant 2.49-acre lot located at the northwest corner of Ryan Street at Quinlan Drive, PWV 088-399-3200. This site is Zone B1 Community Business District with housing for the elderly overlay HEO district. I will open up the public hearing as it relates to that particular topic. Is there anybody that would like to speak on that? No? Okay, then we'll close that one too. Item 3 are citizen comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to share their opinions with commission members on any topic they choose. However, due to Wisconsin open meeting laws, the commission is not able to answer questions or respond to your comments. All comments should be directed to the commission. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Speakers are asked to please use the podium and state their name and address for the record. I will just throw it out there. Is there anybody that would like to make a comment on anything that's either on this tonight's topic or anything else?
I'll make a comment.
Okay.
My name's Mike Sheebley, 481 Park Avenue. I got a few things that I wanted to share with you guys first.
Give it to,
You guys want to pass those out?
I'm sure the rest of the commission.
I don't need one.
Okay. Again, Mike Sheebley, 481 Park Avenue. Does anybody know what this tape measure represents that I put in front of everybody today? I'll give you one clue. It's not the length of my new fishing pole. That I know it's not. Ladies and gentlemen, this right here happens to be the distance of my deck to my neighbor's deck. If you look close enough at the pictures in that I just presented to you guys, you can actually see the remnants of the donut that my neighbor has left that he didn't finish. That's how close I am. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been talking about short-term rentals for the better half of multiple months, and we've talked a lot about the importance of what happens if we get the wrong neighbor in, right? And I am here to ask all of you a question. If you were me standing on my deck Would you want, or would you be okay with having a new neighbor every single week? Every single week. If my neighbor sold his house and to a business that bought it and they're using it for profit, and they're going to turn around and try to bring somebody in every single week or every single month, and I have a new neighbor, I can assure you not a single one of you guys would want to see a new neighbor at 11.6 inches away, 11.6 feet away every single week. Your wives, your husbands, your children, nobody wants that, right? Nobody wants that. And I stand, there's 42 houses on Park Avenue, 42 houses on Park Avenue that are on the water. And I would be willing to bet that I stand with probably 90% of them. You know why? Because the lot lines, the lots are about 50 feet wide. 50 feet wide. So when I look to my right, I see one neighbor. When I look to my left, I see another neighbor. What's in front of us today about relaxing the short-term rentals is sickening to me. And let me tell you more why. Santa Monica, California, New York City, New Jersey, Charleston, San Francisco, Vail, Breckenridge, Steamboat Springs, Denver, Boston, Crested Butte, Eagle, Frisco, Jackson Hole, Wyoming. What does all that mean? Why do I say that? Guys, all of those are cities that have tightened their short-term rental restrictions. You know what? That's far away. You guys are absolutely correct, right? Let's talk about Okauchee. Let's talk about Madison. Let's talk about Oconomowoc and Delafield. Yep. Ladies and gentlemen, those cities right there have also tightened. Plus, not to mention, we talked a lot about, let's see what the city of Sheboygan is doing. No, let's talk about the city of Pewaukee. The city of Pewaukee, I have the ordinance right here that I will share with you. Page 4 of 9. No residential dwelling unit may be rented for a period of 6 or fewer days or more than 29 consecutive days, and no more than 180 days within any consecutive 365-day period. So again, we are looking at what is everybody else doing. Guys, the city of Pewaukee has the most strict guidelines associated with short-term rentals. Why are we asking the question, what other counties, what other municipalities are doing? It's already in front of us. The Park Avenue, 11.6 feet, right? Not enough. Mr. Knutson, my name is Mike Sheebley. My father is John Sheebley. He was a childhood friend of yours. And you told a story last month, a month or so ago, about how you've enjoyed all the times when in your childhood of going out to boathouses, spending time out there, and you couldn't really recall a lot of issues associated with, noise and all this other stuff. And I told that story to my dad, and my dad said, you know what? Yeah, you're right. He said, I was with Jeff at a lot of those parties, but he said, the one thing is, Mike, he said, we weren't over on Park Avenue. He said, we were on the west side of the lake, we were on the north shore of the lake, and he said, you have 50 feet of frontage. So he said, it's different. It's a totally different vibe. So all I'm going to do today, ladies and gentlemen, is I'm going to ask you, please, my family's here, my kids are here. We don't want to have transient neighbors every single week. Please, when you vote tonight, think of your own family and whether or not they would actually want to have, a new neighbor every other day. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment at this time? Yes, in the back row.
See how your clamp works. Jim Grabowski, 128 Park Avenue. I'm actually here to speak on behalf of agenda item F, and speak in favor of the Agape proposal for the new design for the driveway and patio. I could speak from experience that Agape has been amazing stewards to not only that property, but Pewaukee as a whole. They have done amazing work with little resources, and and even my little talent on occasions to make some drastic changes there. I think we would be absolutely foolish to deny this. I know the engineers submitted that there weren't many concerns from a drainage standpoint or anything like that. I think it'd go a long way for beautifying that property and making it more useful for the residents of Pewaukee. But while I'm up here, I might as well also speak as a citizen. I know I will get my chance to talk on this topic probably in a month or two or whenever it passes yours. But on the agenda item 5B, old business, on the transient license, I apologize, I don't have any props with me, but if that's at least a 30-foot ruler, that's how close I am to an actual Airbnb currently. So while some people get up here and speak that live down the street from it, I live adjacent to it. And in the 2+ years it has operated, I have met probably 16 to 18 of those people that have stayed there. I've had conversations with them. I've shared beers, and I don't know if I can say that in the park, at the boat launch there, we'll say that. I have never had an issue. I have never thought of filing any complaint against it. I think these properties are well maintained within the village and go a long way with bringing new people. All these people that I've met were not from the surrounding communities. Most of them were out of state, who fell in love with Pewaukee the same way that we have. Now, some of the communities and everything that were referenced earlier by the speaker earlier may be able to tighten some of those restrictions on those Airbnbs. They also have many hotels and hotel taxes and lodging and everything else that comes along with it. Added revenue streams for those communities that we do not have in Pewaukee currently. Some of you up here know that we are faced with some financial hardships coming. For us to turn a blind eye to a already existing, non-problematic possible revenue stream would be irresponsible in my eyes. And thankfully, President Knutson, the previous speaker, spoke just short of making you having to recuse yourself by tying you so close to this, this issue. So I hope you do vote in favor of a relaxed transient license. I know the proposal said about the permits, the in-town management. I think those are great ideas for oversight. However, to try to turn this away, to turn people away from coming to enjoy our community, as someone who has organized multiple special events within this community, nothing brings us greater joy than when we hear somebody come in to Pewaukee for the first time and speak highly of it. And that's what these do. So thank you very much, Board. I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment at this time? Yes, ma'am.
Melissa Wagner. I live at 512 West Wisconsin Ave. So I just wanted to add on to what that individual just had to say. So I actually own and operate, my husband and I, we own and operate both short and long-term rentals. So we can kind of speak firsthand to what it's like to manage and kind of some of the maybe horror stories that I think a lot of people are accustomed to hearing with short-term rentals. We've been doing this for 3 years and have never had an issue. I think it really comes down to looking at the owner and how responsible they are, and I feel like the village of Pewaukee, we have a lot of responsible people here. Looking at our personal short-term rentals, I mean, we've met a lot of amazing people. We've had really respectful guests. I mean, they keep up our property, they keep up the surrounding area, they bring a lot of tourism to the area. So we've seen a lot of the positives that are coming with short-term rentals and not necessarily the negatives that I think a lot of people are scared of by having this come into our community. So I just wanted to kind of speak on behalf of an operator of a short-term.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment at this time? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Brad Tythcott. I live at 615 Quinlan Drive, very close to the planned expansion for Kirkland Crossing. I'm going to jump back to that if I may. I apologize if that's frowned upon. Because I wasn't planning on talking today. I actually was just hoping to get caught up on what issues were of concern for that particular expansion, but since no one spoke, I guess I'll speak my 2 minutes apiece. I've lived at 615 Quinlan, which is the kitty corner, I guess, condominium to that, for over 15 years. Love the space I'm at. I have to admit, Kirkland Crossings has been a great neighbor. No real big concerns, issue-wise or anything like that. And I can't say that I'm opposed to them being good business people. I was in healthcare, I get it. You're going to expand at some point. But I am disappointed that my view might be compromised with having a big, huge building there on the corner. I don't know that that's a point that's really open for contention. But what is open for contention, in my mind, are two pieces. Is that intersection, when you're headed south and then take a right onto Quinlan, which would be the corner where that expansion is going to be. According to the proposals I saw, where the driveway is going to be directly across from the driveway I leave from. Which, okay, everybody can be mindful of people coming and going. There's actually 4 driveways in that spot. Biggest concern is when you're headed south and take a right onto Quinlan, the slope of that current intersection is such that if you have to stop hard, especially like tonight in the winter when it is slick, you're going to plow right into the meter. So that is because it's happened to me twice with my Jeep years ago, so I know exactly how that feels. So that is one concern, is because now you have cars coming out potentially into your next section of the road from both sides shortly after coming into that intersection. So that's one concern. I am also a former healthcare worker. And I acknowledge the fact that with healthcare, with the elderly people, there's going to be EMS calls. I'm not going to deny that. That's we want to take care of them. However, with an extra, I believe it's 84 units. My bigger concern, one, the noise of the EMS coming, which I know they have to be safe too, but I guess the only other thing I would want to bring up as a concern is potentially the coverage for those EMS calls. I have a lot of friends who are police officers and more so firefighters who have to go on those calls. And with the expansion of that increased number, I would really hope that if it does go through, that the consideration is to make sure we have enough support from EMS to make sure that we're not shorthanded or running elsewhere, so that everybody, if that goes through, is covered the way they should be. So the only last concern I guess I had, and I don't know the statutes on it, is if there is a height limit to the building. Because I know some places, especially around the lake, have a height limit as to how many stories, like in Lake Geneva, that you can have, or some are grandfathered in. I don't know for this building on that corner if there's a particular height limit that may or may not come into play. But again, that was what I was hoping to come here and find out if anybody's could educate me on that. So those are my concerns. I appreciate you letting me kind of jump back and hearing me out, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else that wants to make a comment? No? Okay, then we're going to move on. Oops. Item 4 is the approval of the regular planning commission meeting dated February 9th. I hope everyone's had a chance to go over it and look at it. Are there any questions, comments, corrections as the way they are presented this evening? If not, I'll look for a motion to approve as presented.
Motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
I abstain. I was not at the meeting.
Okay, we have one abstention.
Commissioner Bell as well needs to abstain.
Okay, we still have 4, so we're fine. Okay, we're going to jump to new business and cut up some of this here because I feel that we should be able to do this rather rapidly. Review, discussion, of possible action on request of property owner applicant Waukesha County Technical College, WCTC, to modify the permitted operating hours for the outdoor training facilities located on their campus at 800 Main Street, PWV 092699070001 and PWV 09269997. This campus property is zoned IPS institutional public service. Mary?
Right, so this is an existing conditional use grant. You can see on the screen that the permitted hours of operation currently on Monday through Saturday are from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. What they're asking to change that to is 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. So an expansion of 4 hours total, 2 on the front, 2 on the back. In the packets for your reference, I included the other 2 conditions that were applied the last time these hours were taken up for discussion. And there is additional language in here about limitations on which class of vehicles can be on the track during certain times and on certain dates. And that was all done in the hopes of trying to minimize the loudest equipment from being out there at the least opportune times. And then there's an additional paragraph that talks about having to use, all manner of sound abatement available on the equipment that's on the track to the extent that that is reasonable. So with that, I'll turn it over to the commission. We do know that there have not been any complaints received by the police department with respect to the sound issues of the track.
Comments from the commission?
I'll start if nobody else does.
No, I'll jump in. Go ahead. I'm getting my notes up here.
All right. I get it. There's probably a lot more demand than you have time to fill, but what the gentleman spoke to before was literally what I was concerned about when I was reading this document, going, man, that is too early and that is too late. The village, for its own DPW, doesn't allow our people to go out there and start on any kind of road construction until 7 in the morning, for the very reason of the noise. We don't allow contractors that we engage to do that kind of a thing. So to allow something every day from 6 o'clock and then going till 10, because kids do go to bed early, so I understand why you want to do this, and that's great. I'm glad you're busy, but man, I just, it's a term I feel like I've been saying so much in the last several months about adverse impact. Yeah, that's my concern there.
Mark?
Fun fact about me, Jeff, is that I like to collect licenses. So, and one of the, notary, contractor license, and I have a CDL too. So I feel like I can speak from experience of driving a truck. There's definitely, I don't use it too much, and it's only Class B. There's no getting around it. We are short truck drivers right now. We do need more truck drivers on the road, and unfortunately, the DOT has made getting a CDL much tougher right now. With all that said, there is no way I would ever want this in my backyard. The houses are 250 feet away from the track. And I'm often very sympathetic to places where houses move in next to facilities and then are concerned about noise from facilities. But those houses in Steeplechase, they were there in 2000, and that track went up around 2018. The houses were definitely there first. I think 8 to 8 is already pushing limits. I wouldn't want that noise in my backyard at 8 o'clock or at 8 a.m. No matter what you do and try to, mitigate it, at 7 a.m., some 18-year-old truck driver trainee misses third gear and sends, the diesel up to 3,000 RPM. Like, that's going to make anyone upset. So I'd be against extending these hours.
Any other comments?
I would agree. I think 6 to 10 is definitely a no-go in my book. I'll keep it simple. It's way too early. Way too late.
Makes sense. I'm not mowing my lawn. I snow blow that early, but everybody does because people got to get places. But I'm not mowing lawns and doing that kind of stuff that early in the morning because I do want to respect neighbors. I have the same point. If this was something that the neighbors that weren't there and they built a brand new subdivision and then they wanted to restrict the hours, I would say, no, I was here first and act like a 3-year-old. But the houses were there first, so I'm agreeing with everybody else on this one.
Okay, I'd like to make a comment also. I also am in agreement with all the commissioners. I was not in favor even back when the track was originally proposed. You know, if there's such a need, why does not the college look at other areas to do the training? There's a lot of, I can think of a number of large malls that don't have much going on. Maybe you can rent space there or something. Instead of putting the burden on us, having it go earlier, maybe look elsewhere and then you can really expand your program. But I am not in favor of those early and late hours and in agreement, like Commissioner Roberts said.
Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment? Does anybody want to make a motion?
I make a motion to deny the request, the conditional use amendment request.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is hereby denied. Review, discussion, and possible action / recommendations to the village board on the request of Kirkland Crossings, Inc. to modify the language in Division 3 of the Village Code Housing for the Elderly Overlay HEO District as it relates to the percentage of units in the HEO project that may be allocated for independent versus assisted living. Mary?
Yes, so the elderly housing overlay zoning district is only a couple of short years old. And at the time that it was written, my sense of the Planning Commission's interest in creating the district and intentions within the language itself was really to create this this opportunity in commercially zoned areas to implement higher density residential housing for the elderly in the form of continuum of care type housing, meaning that by the language specifically, it was written to say that the number of independent living units that would be allowed in any project would max out at 50%. And that the rest would all be of the assisted living type, so that we had that balance. Doesn't look too much like a regular multifamily development. Rather, it is legitimately a continuum of care, senior housing type opportunity. So Kirkland Crossings is planning an expansion onto a vacant lot that they own adjacent to their existing facility. And as a part of that project development, they came to the commission in consultation and said, we have various reasons why we feel like we can no longer offer just this 50% maximum independent living units. Principally at the time, I know that the reasons were related to staffing and the difficulty they have in retaining the staff necessary to support assisted living, institutional assisted living. And so they asked the commission, would you be open to a redraft of the language for the Housing for the Elderly Overlay District that would take out that 50% maximum number of independent living units, and in fact go so far as to say that you can allow, the Planning Commission can allow by review and approval up to 100% of the units to be independent living for seniors. And I'll tell you that by our code and the statute, what that housing for the elderly or senior housing means is 55 and older, okay? And so taking a cue off some language that had been provided in draft form by the applicant, what you have in your packets tonight and see on the screen in red is the language that would effectuate a change to allow up to 100%. And the only control on that would be to say that Planning Commission can approve up to 100% versus 50, but they have to first determine that the applicant has provided a detailed and satisfactory plan to allow unlimited access for affiliated or unaffiliated in-home healthcare service providers personally selected by the unit occupants to provide on-site assistance to any tenant or owner occupant of the independent living units. So essentially what that says is, as long as you commit in the conditional use grant document to allow any in-home healthcare service provider to come and serve the people who live in this building on an as-desired basis, that we would in turn be able to grant you up to 100% of independent living units. And so it's not much of a criteria, right? That's a simple statement that you just sign off on and say the same thing that probably most apartment owners do as well, and that is allow their tenants or occupants to have in-home healthcare services come and support them if and when they need that. So that I make that comment to the point of raising concerns from the standpoint of, in making a change like this, I think that you are shifting away from the original purpose for the Elderly Housing Overlay District, which was this continuum of care, and shifting more toward something that might look and act a lot like an ordinary multifamily development, okay? 55 and up can be a very active, very engaged population, so you'd want to bear that in mind. But if it's going to be all independent, one of the other concerns that comes up is, do other criteria about the district then have to change as well, or should we be concerned about those criteria? For instance, with respect to parking, right now we require, at least 2 parking stalls per unit for a multifamily development, plus a 0.5 guest parking stall. And should we now, in the Elderly Housing Overlay District or housing for seniors, all we say about parking is that parking is to be determined on a per project basis. So we aren't very specific about that in the elderly housing category. One of the other concerns would be just with respect to the density that you're now allowing. So in our multifamily zoning districts, we only allow at a maximum up to 12 units per acre. And here, we'd be allowing, as it's written now, up to 20 units per acre, okay? With a potential for an increase in that to even more. So again, the model, the shift is afoot here, that it starts to feel more like a multifamily development, certainly, than not. So really, just bearing in mind those concerns about the fundamental original purpose of the elderly housing for overlay, I guess I will turn it over to the commission for discussion, questions.
Questions, comments? Commission members?
Mary, you had mentioned these become more like apartments and independent living. However, they'd still be owned by Kirkland Crossing, right? And then is Kirkland Crossing paying? Is there tax revenue from that?
So, and I made this recommendation before to the board. Tax implications, things like that, I would recommend that you steer clear of that discussion, because the purview of this commission is land use. And while I understand there's a relation there, any sort of tax implication is handled more at the village board level than at this level. So I would recommend you kind of steer clear of that discussion if you can.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Is somebody here from Kirkland? You're from here? Okay, I have a question. So for what you guys are proposing to do on that section of land, is that going to be set up as part of the existing entity, or is it being set up as a separate entity?
Good evening. I'm Pamela Bells, Development Manager with Senior Housing Partners, which is the development and construction arm of Presbyterian Homes. At this point, Kirkland Crossing is its own entity, and because it's on a separate parcel, we would likely create a new Kirkland Crossing the second LLC or something, just to differentiate it a little bit, which does set it up to be treated differently than Phase 1. So.
Okay, all right, I just want to understand that, thank you. Because part of my thinking, Mary, was that, yeah, by itself, it's being set up kind of like just an apartment complex. If it were part of the whole, now you've got other levels of care as part of the campus. And so that kind of changes the dynamic, I think, with it, because especially if it's a separate parcel, separate corporate entity, it also sets it up to be spun off potentially from that as well. And then we lose that control, because it could be just spun off as an apartment complex as opposed to for senior housing. So yeah, I understand your concern there. You know,
I want to just hitchhike on that and say that that's a really important point that you just raised. And I want you to be perfectly clear that what you're being asked to do is change the code language. So it would not apply just to this site or to this developer. This would apply to any of the B1 or B3 sites where you attach the elderly housing overlay, just to be clear.
Right, oh, absolutely, absolutely. And so as I was reading through this, I guess the overriding concern I have is that the only criteria for allowing up to 100% is basically allowing for in-home care. And I was unsuccessful, but I was trying to think of what other possible criteria could we have that keeps it in that whole mode of senior housing, as opposed to just another apartment complex. Because to me, it seems like there should be other criteria, and that's why I was also wondering if there was a tie-in to the existing, because then it's just an add-on as opposed to being separate, so.
You'd have age limits would be the only other thing that you could really add, which are already.
Well, that's 55 plus,
right,
but.
Which is already there.
You know, and under state statutes, is there a specific kind of legal definition for independent living as opposed to like nursing care, things like that? You know, that whole community-based residential
There are the
set of laws?
definitions in the Housing for the Elderly ordinance itself of essentially everything but independent living. So it defines what is the assisted living, what is the nursing. Skilled nursing services has a definition. Independent living units does have a definition, actually. It's defined as not being assisted living and not being a nursing home unit.
That's what I live in.
I thought we asked last time, and there's national standards that dictate that. Is that correct? Asking the experts that what actually an independent living is from like a national organization that has a definition for that.
That's why I was asking if there are specific sections of law that define, you know, what makes a skilled nursing facility.
There are.
There's
Principally the Wisconsin statutes that to justify that distinction.
And that's the difficulty, not to jump in, Mary, but as a staff, we discuss this too, and that's why, you know, you look at this criteria, and the difficulty we as staff had was coming up with other criteria to make that distinction between those different tiers.
So it's not just me.
And we talked about it, and we anticipated that would be the discussion, the question when this language was presented was, it's a standard, but is one could argue it's an easily met standard. What other criteria can you come up with?
Alternatively, do you feel like 50 is not your number anymore, but you have some other absolute percentage that is your number? To me, that would be the better route to go than to say, well, you know, we'll cap it as we go. Then don't put 100 in there, put 70,
that's
or put 60.
exactly what I was thinking. I'm not good at articulating things. I was thinking, like, can we change the cap so it's a little bit more of a rigid cap instead of 50, not going all the way up to 100, and say 70% for an example? Isn't that more of a clear delineation between what kind of tenants are going to be in there? Where we're giving the properties a chance to fill their buildings, but also not give it a permission slip to just essentially become an apartment building for the elderly.
Reduce some of their constraints because they're stuck under state statutes. Under an assisted living, they have to have X number of staff per 4 or 6 or whatever it is. Whereas if we moved them to 70%, that's going to relieve them 2 or 3 staff members or whatever. Whereas if they were running a memory care, it'd be even more restrictive because those are like 2 to 1.
I'm just trying to kick around ideas. Like 70% doesn't have to be the number. I don't have a number in mind. Actually, I'm thinking about this on the fly. But I'm just thinking, like, what 50 seems to be too low, and 100 doesn't seem to be ideal.
Well,
go ahead.
I was going to say, again, let's kind of go back and remember how we put this ordinance together originally. The 50%. The rationale of the 50% was the idea that if you have a facility where you have these different levels of care, going from independent to assisted to memory care, it's a continuum of care, that the idea is that people start with independent, and then as their needs continue, they go into assisted, and then if they need to, they go into memory care, so they can stay on the campus and have that continuum of care. If we're looking at a development that is standalone and doesn't have those other elements, then it doesn't really fit within the ordinance we put together with that model in mind.
What's your current census over there now as far as how it delineates as far as that and type of care, and then what's you guys fall? Just out of curiosity.
Good evening again, Pamela Bells, Senior Housing Partners. I didn't check the census numbers before I came tonight, but we have, the current campus is a mix of independent, assisted living, and memory care. It is a 50-50 split between IL, AL, and memory care. I can't remember exactly what the numbers are. We have been running vacancies in assisted living since the start of 2020. Okay. And that is not likely to change. If I may, could I make a few comments regarding the ordinance?
Go right ahead.
The driving force that moved us to ask for consideration of a change to the ordinance is that as an operational model that requires 50% IL, and 50% of the units to always be receiving services is extremely challenging for a couple of reasons. One is demand and vacancy rates. The other, more importantly, is the national crisis in care service workers. If we were to open a building that was 50% IL and 50% AL, we likely would open 50% vacant. The national workforce is strained to a point that we have not seen before, especially in healthcare workers. The Leading Age Wisconsin, which is the leading agency that tracks continuum of care kind of issues, long-term care, assisted living, memory care, they published their 2022 report and noted that there are 23,165 openings in caregiver positions, yet the entire labor force in Wisconsin that's available to work is only 19,600. So not even if everyone wanted to work in healthcare could those positions be filled. The caregiver vacancy rate is almost 28%, 27.8%, which is double what it was in 2016. The national job market for healthcare, there's a 7% vacancy rate, which, or net overall 7%. Healthcare is at 9%. We have increased wages for any kind of frontline worker several times since 2020, and we still have either no applicants, or they'll set up an interview and then they don't show, or they accept a job and then they don't show for a shift. It's extremely challenging to try to operate under any sort of service delivery model, which is why we concentrate it in our mini continuum. Even with care centers in Wisconsin alone last year in 2022, 7 nursing homes closed, and other facilities restricted the number of beds available, including ours. And in Wisconsin, that was a loss of over 2,000 beds, and that is strictly because of staffing. Not everyone moves through a continuum of care. So they may hold out in IL as long as they can, and then something happens and they go straight to a nursing home, or they pass away. So not everybody moves very neatly through the continuum, so a 50-50 ratio from that standpoint doesn't translate. In addition to the lack of staff, the demand is different than it was. Right now, in the market studies that we've done, for this area, there is a strong demand for independent living, and there is a negative demand for any kind of assisted living or memory care. So operating in that kind of model wouldn't be viable. One thing that you, as a couple points to consider, one is that even though it's on a different tax parcel, we will operate as a campus. So the main campus would be delivering care or available to in the new building. If people in the new building, we will encourage them to go over to the existing campus to participate in community activities, in chapel and continental breakfast and everything. It will act like one campus. So it's not like there is nowhere to go if they need higher needs. And our suggestion that instead of requiring a 50-50, that we make it a condition of the conditional use grant to have a plan in place that requires availability of services to come in and deliver care, keeps that as a service that we can provide as people need it. What we would normally do and what you could require would be RCAC requires a form of certification from the state. It is its own. CBRF is the next step up, but RCAC, what we would intend to do is carry RCAC floating licenses. So whichever apartment someone was in and needed care, we could deliver to that apartment and not force them to move to an assisted living apartment. So that's what the flexibility that a floating RCAC license would give. And we would say, as that building ages or as people come in needing services, we would do up to 100% RCAC floating licenses if needed. We'll just float with whatever the market demands and whatever the residents need. So it's not like we would be excluding it. And maybe the RCAC floating licenses gives you some language that you could incorporate somehow. I'm not sure. I haven't thought it all through yet, but that definitely would be something we would do. And the average age of our independent resident is 84. So.
Thank you.
And we're available for questions.
Well, I haven't said anything, but I have no problems with the 100% for this, because I remember the presentation they gave last time, and the market has shifted. It's moved away from more people going in for assisted, and more people that just want to have their own place and be able to be around people of their own age and maybe have things to do in their facilities and stuff. So I could see this, and as you said before, that you would have people that may need a little bit of assistance come in. You'd have other people who take care of them. And if it comes to a point where they need total, they could maybe move on to the other area. Or down the line, maybe it'll switch back and half of that building will become memory and assisted living. As far as the healthcare, as far as fire and EMS services, we contract with the city, and they are the highest rated fire department and EMS service in the state. And we've got the best care when it comes to that. So I'm not too worried about if there is an issue of getting somebody over there in time. But I truly feel I have no problem going with the 100%.
You know, Jeff, I'm not concerned with the number. I mean, I'm fine flexing up from the 50, certainly. My concern is, and I think this is what Mary's trying to reflect, is there has to be some objective way to specify that a facility that's built and used qualifies for a certain status in order to be eligible under this overlay district. Otherwise, what would keep the people that own the property across the street from saying, hey, I want that overlay district too, because I want to put in 300 units?
Planning Commission. Well, no, we don't want.
What I'm saying is, does it meet the criteria and the definition? It's B3, So I'm just saying is, just so that someone can't use this, calling it independent living, in order to get underneath that criteria, whether it's a certification from the state or, like I say, I'm struggling for, and I know you guys are struggling for too, as to there's got to be some criteria met other than just allowing someone to go into a facility and provide care.
How about adding, the facility has to be part, or not part of, but associated with an abutting community or assisted living, and
that's why I was asking if it's going to be associated with it or not,
It's owned by the same company, is what I'm saying. Is that it's next door to a unit or a business that is now existing that the company owns.
We'd want to, directly adjacent. That's
right adjacent to.
That's exactly what I
Does not have to be part of it.
Is that something we could, does that fit
So I guess the only issue I have with that is this item, as we talked about, this is a change of the code. So it doesn't just affect this development, it affects every development with this overlay, right? Mm-hmm. And discussing it in conjunction with another agenda item that's on tonight, I just don't want it to seem like we're putting that condition in there for this development specifically. If you can have some discussion or something on the record as to why you think that specific condition, having an adjacent facility already in existence, why that would be a sufficient criteria for this, I think that would be helpful.
I think Craig, sorry, go ahead.
And I think you're going down that path.
I thought Craig kind of mentioned it, go across the street and someone throws up an apartment building and says, hey, it's 100% independent living. I mean, and that's not what it's just basically an apartment building. And it's kind of, like he said, exploits that loophole.
Couldn't, if the
or even 90%, it still kind of, exploits that.
If the motion is made with that criteria placed in it, such as I move to approve this, and the reason is I'm approving it due to the fact that the company that owns it is adjacent to this particular unit, and that is the reason I'm allowing this to happen.
See, that, what I'm saying is, this agenda item is a general policy discussion as to changing the code.
Right.
So I understand that it's here in conjunction with a specific proposal, but we have to be mindful of the fact that this is not just going to affect Kirkland. So when you do make a motion to approve, and the discussion you're having here in adding this condition, what I'd like to see from the commission is, why would that condition be widely applicable to the village as a whole? Why would that, not just for Kirkland, but why would that condition, why would it be a good criteria for getting to that 100%?
Are you sure you guys can't just make this as an extension of your existing business? It'd be a lot easier.
Because then they'd have to come back and get that property rezoned to be part of the other property.
Oh, yeah. We would rezone the existing one.
I mean, what,
Like that.
I hear what you're saying, and I'm trying to, I think we're starting to get close.
Maybe not.
Like,
I think the discussion is heading in that way.
yeah,
But I
so
just,
what do we need to, what do you need to see?
it's not like checking the boxes, but you've already had some discussion, generally speaking, why a condition like this, and I can't put words in your mouth, but, you know.
Sure you can.
I mean, I can try.
It doesn't pay for it.
I can try. There's no magic bullet. What I'm seeing is I'd like to see more discussion as to why this is not just good for Kirkland, but good for other.
So I'll, go ahead, Scott.
But I guess, would there be economies beneficial by having neighboring establishments providing services? That one building provides for independent, with the opportunity up to in-home or in-unit assisted living, being adjacent to a facility that has a continuum of care available, as well as additional services that may be available to the tenants of the neighboring facility under one consortium of ownership or operation.
What he said.
Again, it kind of feels like we're trying to knit this together for one specific person, you know? And really, my concern, to your point, my concern is really not, for example, the one we've already approved off of 164. I'm not worried about a change in this affecting that too much. My concern more is, because we have them every day, people coming to us saying, we want to build apartments. And we push against that. We have for quite a while. This creates that loophole of saying, yeah, I'm not going to do apartments, I'm going to do independent living facilities, and I'm on B1 property, and I meet all the criteria, and therefore under Act 67 to 68, you should give me that criteria. Someone's going to do that. I guarantee you.
I guess that's what I mean, you brought up the point, like, if it's on the same campus, and maybe we got to further define what it means to be on the same campus and affiliated with an existing building. I think that's what would avoid that from happening, because you can't just necessarily put a freestanding apartment building next to a skilled nursing facility on the same campus and say, oh, no, it's independent living, although it's just an apartment building.
Can we just say, like, can we, with definitive metrics, say affiliated with a facility within 200 yards?
Could you do it this way? I'm listening to all this discussion. Would it be different if there was no property lines there? If they just happen to own that piece, an extra piece of land next to what they have there, would you then think that putting up this facility would be just an extension of what they have?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I don't want to be specific, but I mean, to a certain degree, you could say, you got to, once again, we're talking code versus the other state, but the code could say, if you want to have this type of facility at a senior housing, you have to own the land contiguously to put that facility on that property. In the Kirkland case, they would have to do a CSM, combine the lots, it's all one lot. And they end up with this vacant area of one large lot. I don't know if they want to do that, but I mean, for our other facilities, you could say that. I mean, the code could say that. It has to be on the same piece of property. So you would have automatic ownership
Property is set up.
by the same group.
Well, technically for that, because the existing one's under IPS, and the overlay was put for B1 and B3, because we moved it, because we moved it.
It can be zoned multiple things, but there was reluctance early on by the applicant to combine the parcels.
That can also get complicated if one entity owns the land and, another entity owns the real estate and they're leasing, which could get oftentimes complex.
Well, but the option is, then they can't do it. I mean, if it doesn't go and we're.
Right, but I'm just saying within Kirkland, Kirkland
so.
Real Estate LLC may own the land and then they lease it to Kirkland, I'm not just saying Kirkland, but, Assisted Living LLC could own real estate can own the land, and then, Assisted Living Developments builds the building and they're leasing it, and to have that language kind of could often, I think.
Couldn't the facility do that anyway?
They typically do.
At other places?
Why
We don't know
can't-
if they have two buildings, if there's another facility that has two buildings, which I think we do have one on Capitol there. Do we know that there's only one operation for that?
I know, but if we're defining the code based on combining lots, it would.
I don't understand why we can't put in the ordinance that an existing care facility that the person owns would have to be within 200 feet of the building that they're using now.
I think you can put that in there. What I'm asking for is why. Why you want to put that in there?
Well, I think Craig kind of mentioned that we would prefer not to have somebody exploiting it coming in and saying, this is my independent living facility and I only got to provide care to 10% of the residents in there and the rest of it is boom apartments, and we're trying to.
Or if you word it in a sense of, you want to have 100% independent living, there must be AL and MC within X amount of yards to encompass a CRRC campus, a continuum of care campus per se.
But that's the challenge with this one, is this is a wholly separate entity. It is not an expansion of Kirkland. It is a wholly separate entity that could be sent off to, or spun off to some other organization, or it could be abandoned and sold as an apartment. Because it is a separate legal entity.
But I mean, truthfully, can't any of our nursing homes then?
No.
Be spun off and sold as
No,
apartments?
like the one that was approved on 164.
Right.
One piece of property, one owner, the continuum of care is within one campus.
Okay.
So to meet the definition under our overlay ordinance, they had to meet all this criteria, X% independent, X% assisted living, X% for memory care, and all the amenities that go with it. So.
And identify those within the floor plan. Each unit is identified.
Right.
IL,
Because
CR.
legally, technically, what's being looked at today, and I know I'm ahead of myself a little bit, but it all ties to the ordinance, is what we're being asked is that a facility come in, put up a building, 100% of it doesn't matter who owns the property next door, it doesn't matter any of it. It's someone comes in, puts up a building, 100% of it's independent living. And so where are the controls?
What happens down the road if the owner of this building, who at the time it was approved, was within 200 feet of a CBRF, AL, memory care place, but do we have some sort of a contract that says you two will be forever married in this fashion?
That's the
and neither of you will ever change your uses?
That's the issue with what I have with defining it by ownership rather than the type of facility that it's adjacent to. That, I think, makes more sense, and I think you can have a rationale for that than defining it by a common ownership, because I think you're going to run into that exact problem, which is what's to say that that facility's not going to be owned by the same two people? And in the Kirkland case, they're not at this point. They're two separate entities, so.
So more along the line of what Commissioner Belt was saying is more pleasing to the attorney. Is that right?
More geographical.
Geographically, yes, geographically based than ownership based.
Okay, so
I would say that's
not
what-
like, not about the care, levels of care, but geographically based.
What type of facility is adjacent or adjoining or near? That's sort of thing.
But what if Kirkland, current Kirkland goes out of business? And now we still have the IL building.
Kirkland Apartments.
But again, my concern would be is, let's say I wanted to build an apartment across the street, across Ryan. And I can say, hey, Kirkland is only 300 feet away from my building. Can I claim that? And because of the proximity, I can build one there?
Not if you don't own the property now.
But we're not talking about ownership.
Yeah, we are.
How many? We're talking about proximity. I mean, the issue is what Mary identifies too. You're identifying that a conditional use by a point in time. So the surrounding properties may change, but you're defined by when it was approved.
Is it feasible at all to like explore, so if we're talking proximity, what about physical attachment? I'm thinking a little outside the box, but like literally a skywalk connecting them. So they're independent structures. I don't care if it's a city block, you gotta have them physically connected to each other. I know that's a big cost for the developers, but I'm just trying to think outside the box. Like, how do we make this happen where it is to avoid, like what Commissioner Craig is saying, like somebody not saying, well, I'm gonna do it because it's 198 yards away. You have to be connected to the property that meets the other standards. So physically.
I can see we're not gonna get anywhere here, so I'm gonna make a motion to defer this to the next meeting and have our staff try to come up with some type of language that they feel. I know you've worked really hard on this already, but you've heard some of the comments and you've heard a lot of the discussion, arguments for and against. So I would like to defer this. Do I have a second?
Second,
Roll call vote, please.
I'd like a comment first.
You can't once I run the second.
Can I retract my second?
A motion to defer is different than a motion to table.
Okay, you can make a comment.
Okay, maybe this timeframe too would give Kirkland Crossing an opportunity to rethink this also. Maybe it could be incorporated in the current campus.
Or whatever they can come up with,
But
yeah.
we're talking about the current campus right now, right?
No,
we
it's
haven't.
separate. It's two different properties.
Right, but we haven't gotten to the new property either.
No, we
Discussing
haven't.
it yet. So, and I think that's where I'm getting a little confused too, is because we have they're both on the agenda.
Well, they're both on the agenda only if the first one, which we're discussing now, gets approved, because the second one needs to have this approved so they can look at building this one.
Let's, one agenda item at a time.
Yeah.
So let's.
So this one here, I'm asking to defer at this time.
Or tables, is it table?
Defer.
Okay.
I'll second Jeff, or President Case.
She already seconded.
Oh, it was your, okay, I thought you said.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, we're deferring this. So I would say that we're going to take this off of the table tonight and discuss it at the next meeting. Because what you're going to propose this evening on the next item is not have been approved by the board.
Well, there's multiple facets to the agenda item, so what I would suggest is read it, have Mary make at least her presentation.
Well, what I'm thinking of doing here, I'd like to know how many people are here for the rentals, the short-term rental property. Just two? Okay, well then, sorry, I'm gonna put you on. I thought everybody was here. Yeah, we're gonna go right on down then. Review, discussion, and possible action on the request of property owner Kirkland Crossing, Inc. to develop an 84-unit housing for the elderly building project on vacant 2.49-acre lot located at the northwest corner of Ryan Street at Quinlan Drive, PWV 0883993200. This site is zoned B1 Community Business District with housing for the elderly overlay HEO district. Mary?
Sure. So the applicant has got the elderly housing overlay zoning now on this 2.49 acre vacant site. And we have received their plans to develop that with an 84 unit, all independent senior living development, combination of 36 one-bedroom units and 48 two-bedroom units. Spatially, the units are sizable. They include a sunroom, patios, balcony space, and so forth. There's also other amenity space within the building, common space that would include things like a club room, a wellness studio. There are some resident storage spaces, and there's a lounge space in the building. So within the elderly housing overlay district, we have very specific spatial and bulk requirements that are specified. And to whatever extent they aren't specified, it would defer to the base zoning district, which is B1 in this case. So I applied those criteria to the developer's plan and conclude that on 2.5 acres, at the permitted density of 20 units per buildable acre, they could get up to 50 units in the development. As to the specific proposal tonight, they're asking for 84 units. If you granted them, the Planning Commission has the authority in the elderly housing district to grant up to 150% of permitted density. If certain other elements of the plan, such as underground parking and things of that sort, are done. And so if they went up to 150%, their maximum density would be 75, okay? So much like the independent living criteria of maximum 50%, I could not anticipate that their development proposal would end up coming in also over the 150% that you're allowed the latitude to extend to. So from that perspective, I guess I just want to make the commission aware that in my recommendations, ultimately, I say that I do recommend this be tabled because there's no flexibility within the conditional use grant section of the code on that point specifically, and there's no specific flexibility on it in the elderly housing. So that would also have to go through a code amendment process, just like the one you were just talking about, that would give you the authority to flex to a percent greater than 150%. So that's something for the commission to consider. 84 units is over the 150. You can't approve more than 150 under the current language. It's going to have to be tabled and dealt with as a code amendment at a future date. But with the balance of the project, maximum building floor area ratio, 40%, they offer 29, so they're code compliant. Maximum building height, 52 feet allowed. They are well over that, as you'll see in a PowerPoint presentation they're going to give. They were not providing the right base elevation information in the plans that are in your packet. And so that was a continuing work in progress all the way up until last week when we finally got the message through how we calculate height, and that'll show up a little bit later. But they are well over the maximum permitted height here. Minimum building setback, they are compliant. Minimum side and rear yards, compliant. Minimum open space ratio, they exceed. And parking lots and drives on the proposed plan, they're compliant along the Quinlan Drive frontage, but they're not compliant along Ryan Road, where you see that pavement sweeps out closer to Ryan Road, and I believe that is related to fire fire slip lane access, basically, to get in there in an emergency situation. So really, it's pretty straightforward where they do and do not comply with the specific standards of the code. Within the conditional use grant forum, you do have the authority to waive or modify that maximum height requirement to the building. So that is something that they would be eligible to ask you about. The other points that I raised in my report have to do with the fact, again, and I brought this up under the previous item, if this shifts entirely to an independent living arrangement for seniors, and you're going to introduce the potential for in-home healthcare service to be provided to all of those units, and because we don't specify the actual number of stalls required per elderly housing unit, I have some concerns about the parking that's being proposed in this scenario. They've got 84 units and 81 stalls in the underground space, and they've only got 15 parking stalls on grade, which would be for visitors, in-home healthcare staff visiting the property, maintenance, things of that sort. So 15 stalls, to me, says that I would suggest we at a minimum are requesting that they come back with some sort of an analysis that affirms the fact that only 15 stalls are going to be needed, okay? Otherwise, architecturally, I think the building it's a nice uptick on what they did with the original Kirkland Crossings. It's complementary but not identical in terms of style, materials, colors, all of those things. I don't have any concerns to raise for you on the architectural front. Suitability of the use in the context of the surrounding area, I think that was already addressed when you were willing to add the elderly housing zoning onto the property, and I think it's a suitable place for this. In terms of landscaping, it's very thorough, it's well thought out. Where it's located generally meets, and in certain specs, does exceed the village code for number of plantings required per 1,000 square feet of open space. There's no outdoor trash receptacle or storage area. It's going to be in the underground level of the building, the parking level of the building. Exterior light fixtures are compliant as to their cutoff design. The dispersion plan is compliant, not in excess of 0.5-foot candles at the lot lines, except in one spot on the driveway at the Quinlan Drive access point. And that could be from ambient light elsewhere in the area, but I don't view that as excess beyond our policy of 0.5-foot candles on the ground at the lot line. HVAC screening will have to come up at a future date for staff review and approval when they know the locations for that stuff. And there's an existing monument sign on the site that's proposed to remain. It's going to have a little bit of styling change. They do also show on the landscaping plan another monument sign along Quinlan, but we don't have details for it, including its setback, for instance. And so that will simply have to be addressed through a sign permit application subsequent to the CUG. So in terms of the recommendation, what I'm saying is that I do recommend this be tabled because the Planning Commission doesn't presently have the authority to approve 84 units. Up to 75 would be your maximum permission at this point. But I think I'm glad we went ahead and had this item presented and are going through it because I think it will be constructive and useful feedback to the applicant as to this plan when the language issues are all addressed in the code and they come back to you. But my conditions that I'm recommending be considered for attachment would include that the fire department give their final review and approval as to the serviceability of the project from the public safety standpoint. I know that you said you've been in touch with them, but don't have a final consent of the fire department on the plan. So we want to have that. Number two, village engineer review and approval of all of those detailed plans that Tim goes through. Number 3, final determination as to the acceptable number of total parking stalls to be provided. And on that account, I would recommend that you ask the applicant to provide a parking analysis demonstrating to you the satisfactory supply of parking to serve the building. Paragraph 5, condition 5, village staff review and approval of HVAC once we know those locations and how it will be screened. Jumping back to number 4, sign permit to be issued for both signs, any signs that are proposed to be put on the site. Number 6, village staff review and approval of the detailed schedule of building materials and colors consistent with the colored renderings. There are a few items on the architectural drawings that don't expressly list a color name or type or material make, and we want to make sure we have that all in the final plans. And then lastly, the Planning Commission, just to provide express acknowledgement of the areas where you are going potentially to offer waiver on certain standards. Here, for instance, that would apply to like the building height. So really with that, I would turn it over to Tim for his items, and I know the applicant also was hoping to make a presentation about the project.
Tim?
All right, pretty simply here, our site grading is basically from north to south on the site. They are doing an exposure on the south side with underground parking, so it somewhat fits pretty well with the grade. The building will be about 5 feet lower than that access road that goes to the strip mall and past McDonald's there. It'll be about 5 feet below that, but fits the grade really well of Quinlan. There will be the stormwater management on it. There will be underground stormwater management. We don't see that very often here, but there'll be large pipes underneath the parking area, the entrance and parking area. And so there won't be any ponds on site. Allows a little bit more green space. And we did a technical review of those, and we made some comments to the engineer, and we don't see any major issues related to meeting the stormwater requirements of the village. As far as sewer and water goes, there's water on Ryan Road that they could tap into, as well as sanitary sewer actually along the west lot line. So it kind of goes between this property and the existing Kirkland Crossing, and they would just tap into that. We see no issues related to capacity and making those connections. As far as access goes, I did they sent me a diagram that showed how a fire truck would proceed through that parking lot and get back out, just to make sure it can get through. I sent that to Chief Bierce to get his comments to make sure that they use the right fire truck type, and then just to get any more comments from him. I didn't hear anything back from him, and so we might have some time on that to get something back from him. I know there was a comment earlier about just the amount of turning movements coming out of Quinlan there. There are 3 driveways on the south side of Quinlan. You know, there's a 4-family that sits there, and so there's 2 from basically from the Quinlan side, and then 1 other driveway from the back side, that would be the west side that would come out to Quinlan, you know, south side I think it is. But anyway, the issue with typically with elderly housing, I'll call it, or you know, senior housing like this, is they don't really use when they're using their access, it's usually not during peak times, which is like 7 to 9 in the morning, and usually there's a peak hour in there that's really defines it, or sometimes like 3 to 5 or 3 to 6 in the afternoon. I'm sorry, like 4 to 6 in the afternoon is like peak time. A lot of the traffic studies that are out there, international traffic studies, indicate that, you know, with this type of housing, you don't get vehicles going out at those times, depending on the type of elderly housing, of course. And if there's 55 and older, you may have people still working, still using that, but it won't be all of them. If it was obviously 65 and older and people are retired and they're there, they don't always go out, and we don't have this rush to get out to work at 8 o'clock. So I didn't see any issues related to the traffic patterns that would cause us many issues at that particular location. So I was ready to recommend, approval of the engineering drawing, subject to, I had sent a letter to the engineer on technical items, but I think we're pretty close on what they need to do from a technical standpoint.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheryl, before we have the presentation, I'm going to let the staff or the commission speak so that they have an idea of what pros and cons we may have before you do your presentation.
Okay, Mary, I appreciate that you talked about the parking. An analysis, I would look to go beyond that. I really believe that parking needs to be expanded significantly there. As personal experience from more than one independent living facility, you said the average age is 84. Many of the individuals, once they reach that age, are using walkers, so they're not going to have cars parked underground in the stall assigned to them. But what they will have are physical therapists coming in, nurses coming in, family members coming in, caretakers to bring their food, people coming in to clean. I think that this 15 stall for 84 units is just significantly below what is really going to be needed. And like I said, I know there's some experience. Going to visit my mother, a large facility, there's many a day that so many of those spots are taken. And I watch and I see who's coming in and out. Plus their own friends, for 84 units, 15 stalls, what is that, one per ballpark, 6 units? I think it just will not serve this type of building. I'm looking at least double what it probably would need. And like you mentioned, like what was mentioned, you're right. They're not going to be all leaving at 8 a.m. What will happen, the caretakers come in, it's, daytime things. By 5:30, 6 o'clock at night, you don't see much activity going on there anymore, or 8 a.m. So I think that would be something I'd really need to see expanded. This 15 will not serve this facility properly at all.
Is there any other commissioner that would like to make a comment?
I have another question.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I assume there's no type of restaurant proposed for this?
We'll touch on that in a moment.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Yes, great.
Go ahead.
Mary, you were talking about with respect to density and the building heights and so forth. Personally, I have no interest in modifying any of those conditions within the ordinance. There's a reason why we had that, because one is we're dealing with density all the time. In fact, that's also on the agenda in general to talk about density with apartments. So there's a reason why we have that on there, and for 2.5 acres to try and pack 84 units, yeah, that's 10 pounds in a 5-pound sack. The height we have on there, again, there's a rationale for that. One is tying it in, and we've been going through and trying to evaluate that on a whole village basis of trying to have some consistency between the different zones for building heights. And a lot of it goes to the fire department in terms of how far can their trucks reach. So the fact that, you're substantially over that, the facility that we just approved within the last year over on 164, they only got the exception because there was one little ornamental peak that went a foot above it. The rest of the main line was below the standard, and so we allowed that exception, but basically just way too high. And so again, I'm not looking to try and modify the ordinance and go through that process, because again, this is a brand-new ordinance, to accommodate this. What I would recommend is cut it down from 4 floors to 3 floors. You not only lose the number of units to get the density right, but also you don't have the height issue as well. So those are ones that, if we don't address the ordinance, this is going to be a problem, just in terms of meeting the specs. And again, the parking, the rationale for the parking to be kind of soft in terms of definition is the ordinance was built on the concept of a campus having assisted, independent, and memory care, recognizing that very few people in assisted living have cars. People in memory care certainly don't have cars, and so you don't need that. In an independent, you're probably going to have more cars, and so again, this ordinance doesn't fit that model of just purely independent living on there, and so, I think we do almost have to, as we're considering that, if it's still a consideration, is do we apply the underlying ordinances we have in terms of on-site parking that we would with an apartment complex?
Which is what I've got up here.
Right, that's what I'm saying, but that's not part of this ordinance that we're talking about. That's the challenge with it, but yeah, like I said, I don't want to go down that road of trying to rebuild this thing. There's a rationale for those. Like I said, I've always kind of fought against the 50% for independent, but these are two that I don't feel we want to push against.
Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment before the presentation? Yes, Mark.
Second that. I haven't been part of all the conversations, especially the density one, but obviously I know you guys put a lot of work into coming up with those numbers. As far as the height goes, we did a lot of talk and discussion on that. And it's a safety item. It's not just ornamental or decorative or a punitive thing. And I'm also very concerned about the parking on there. 84 units, some of them 2-bedroom. We got 81 parking spots and 15 somewhere on the surface like that. We not only have residents who are driving, we got employees there, and now because we're opening it up to outside caregivers, now outside caregivers have to have parking there too, before we even starting talking about the visitors who are going to come there. So I don't think the parking is sufficient. With that said, I do like the design. I think it's a beautiful building. It's in a great location, and I do like that you guys use biofiltration basins. It's a special place in my heart for those. But one question I had was that, is this sanitary, and for the engineer, for Tim, is the sanitary sewer that we're connecting to, is that their existing private lateral for their other building? Or is that public?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Is the sanitary sewer lateral that they're connecting to, is that Kirkland's own lateral, or is that?
Well, there's a public main on the west property line. That's public.
So that's public.
So they'll have their own, this building will have their own private lateral, just like any other.
Okay, I was wondering, because you said it's connected. I was hoping I was trying to think of a way. If there's a private lateral and they connected to it, then it would be some sort of connection between the buildings that we could possibly do that. So skywalk underground, so one way just trying to
connect a pipe.
Trying to think of it. So because we don't allow private laterals between people, so that could have worked. But anyway, all right, those are all my thoughts on it. Now I'll turn it over. Anyone else wants to speak?
Anyone else have any?
I'm kind of in the same boat. Just that's too many not compliance for me, at least to start.
Okay. Would you like to do your presentation?
Good evening again. Thank you for your comments. We certainly will take all those to heart. We did want to provide our presentation tonight just to fill you in a little bit more on the details and some of the whys behind things. If I may, I want to comment on what we were talking about a little earlier. The existing campus is on its own parcel and is financed separately from the financing we would do on this parcel, which is why they weren't combined. And the existing parcel is on a pilot agreement, and as proposed, that is not something we were going to ask for the phase two. So those were a couple of the reasons that they were separate. I can certainly talk to our legal about how do we deal with some of the financing intricacies if we use this exactly the same entity. All our entities, all our campuses are under different legal names, and they all flow back to the parent. The parent is the sole member of that, so they all flow back to Presbyterian Homes, so that there is an underlying ownership there. As thinking about, the other thing about constraints is that giant utility easement. We, a few years ago, looked very strongly at trying to figure out a way to expand the end of the IL building to add more, but we can't because of that, all the utilities that run through there. We physically can't connect to the buildings. So that's why we looked at an independent model that was associated with and will be connected by sidewalks and will share staff, but isn't physically connected there. Thinking about criteria for the elderly overlay ordinance, your criteria about adjacency, you could do something with requiring senior programming activities related to that, which is an operational model, but you were already aiming at operational with the assisted living. You could talk about RCAC licensing and a certain percentage of those floating licenses to carry. So just some ideas on that. We'll address some of the points that Mary made in her report and that you all have made in our presentation. So I just want to introduce a couple members of our team that are here tonight. We have Eric Harmon with Lucy Architecture and Terry Meyer, the principal engineer with Sigma. So they each have a portion of the presentation, and then I'll wrap it up quick at the end. Thank you.
All right. As Pam mentioned, I'm Eric Harmon from AG Architecture. I'm the Chief Design Officer for the firm and the lead designer for this project. I will echo that during resident meetings, we have gotten requests for physical connections and have had to tell them a number of times that the physical connection can't be done with the utilities that are running between the sites. So I will go through the presentation, and if we can jump past the brief introduction, Mary, and I think if we hop down to slide 5 and then 6. Let's go right to 6 with the site plan. So I think, as Tim had mentioned, there's a number of things that went into consideration as we were laying out this building, and primarily it was the grading of the site. As you move from north to south, the grade drops considerably off towards the end of the development. So we've positioned the front door and the primary access to the development off of Ryan Road visually. So you see the front door, you see the experience of the courtyard and the amenities and the front door, but because of inability to access off of Ryan Road and the way the grade works, we were really required to enter off of Quinlan Drive. As we looked at the layout, it made sense for us to align with an existing curb cut across the street from a traffic flow standpoint that reduces the number of interferences that we were looking at from the road. So that is why the alignment happens at that point. As we zoom in here, you're noticing that we are directly adjacent to Kirkland Crossing. We are offering a sidewalk connection that connects back to the fire lane of the existing campus. So that is how fire department is servicing the existing building through the back area, wrapping around the retention pond, and how we would also anticipate residents and staff making a connection, and how fire would get to the backside of this building as well. So that's a key component to this overall design. On the Quinlan Ave side, that slope allows for our direct access into the underground parking, but also is detrimental to how the building height is being measured. And we'll get into that when we get into the elevations. But you have the ability to drive directly into the underground parking or ramp up to the front entry. With this being a ramp and the grade change, it's significant to the senior living environment. Not a lot of senior pedestrians should be traversing anything that's outside of ADA accessible grade. So we have basically put all of that slope change into the vehicular area of the transportation right at the front end. So by the time that they're parking and getting to the front door, they have an accessible access to the door. That's a big part of the site constraints of this, and a big reason why there are very little additional parking stall opportunities on this site. In addition to, we are not able to access off of Ryan. If we go to the next plan, we can get a little bit into the overall site landscaping. Terry, if you want to touch on that.
Terry Meyer with the Sigma Group. So as Eric had mentioned, there's a lot of grade change, and I'll kind of give you a number. There's 19 feet drop from one side to the other, which is significant, and which is why we designed the site how we have. So you'll notice that we have an underground stormwater system kind of on the south side of the, where the lowest point is. That allows us to capture as much of the stormwater that'll hit our site, and we'll detain it and treat it, filter it, and provide the stormwater regulations through this system. It then would discharge into the underground storm sewer within Quinlan Drive. Part of the advantage of having an underground system is you have a lot more green space. We have about 44% green space on our site, which allows us to really enhance the landscaping. You'll see the landscaping we have. We designed it for a seasonal impact. We have some evergreens, some deciduous bushes, as well as flowering perennials and some ornamental grasses. We have a screen from essentially going all the way around the building to try to block the light from the streets on Quinlan as well as Ryan Street. There's some evergreens and some canopy trees that we have at varying heights, which also help to soften the height of the building. With that significant drop, it's kind of tough in some locations to kind of mask that, and so we feel that having larger trees in some of those areas helps to reduce the height of the building, even though technically it's tall in some areas. Along with the screening, we have some landscaping beds that are staggered. Instead of having rows of plantings, we have the staggered organic looking planting beds to make a nicer feel on the site. And we also have some seed mixes on the east and the west side of the site that allow for they attract birds and butterflies to kind of enhance the residents' experience on site. So.
Thanks, Terry. As we go to the next slide, mentioning how that slope works, is by the time you get to So as you kind of work, we've now rotated the building, just for everybody's orientation. So the end of the unit has the two bedrooms on the end condition. That's kind of the terminus of the corridor. That's the end of the building that faces Quinlan. By the time you get past those two end condition units, you have climbed the extent of that grade change. And that's critical because we have that at-grade accessible access to the entry. And that entry sequence leads you to all the amenities that are senior specific in this layout. We obviously have a leasing office to support the operations, mail, but then there's some shortages on the existing campus for good wellness and fitness programs. So we're offering a significant fitness area and wellness component. We have a lounge area and then a club room. And then the key component of that club room is that it's designed to feel residential and aesthetically look like a gathering place for all the residents, but it's serviced directly behind it with a serving kitchen, so that as we have the more intense RCAC needs within the building, a larger dining program can be offered within the building. And that was designed into the footprint, taking some square footage out of usable amenity space and recognizing that as the building ages, that will become a critical need, whether it starts with independent living or starts with 30% RCAC. That area would have a direct service to the clubroom and then also to the courtyard space, so that during the nicer months of the year, you can also be dining outside. So that was an example of one of those things where it's specifically designed for the senior residents in mind. In addition, we have flexible space within the floors where each level has a socialization opportunity that faces back to the existing campus, has their own outdoor space, but then can meet the programmatic needs of the RCAC certificate in the future. You can't have a larger population of assisted living residents without having that socialization space built into the program. So that's a critical component to the overall first floor development, is that we're really taking into account that this is an extension of Kirkland Crossing that these residents can come from and traverse to the other campus. If we go to the next slide, we're looking at the overall aesthetic of the building as you're looking at the front door. So picture this as a kind of a 30-foot view from the corner of Quinlan and Ryan. And you're seeing the front door, you're seeing the access drive. And one of the points that Tim had mentioned from an engineering standpoint, the non-compliance that we have on the additional asphalt is specifically for fire department turning radiuses to be able to get into and service directly at that front door. Ryan Road is directly adjacent, so in theory, you could service the building in the future from Ryan Road, but this gives you the ability to be on campus at the front door. So if there is an emergency need, they don't need to wheel anybody off of the property. They can be addressed directly at the front door. Architecturally, I appreciate the compliments that we've heard thus far. It was our intent to build upon the positive architecture that was existing on Kirkland campus, but bring it to a little bit more modern aesthetic. Modern in the use of fiber cement and brick and stone, but still treating it with a traditional formed gable with brackets and everything that you'd expect to see in a high quality development. And then lastly, with this image, again, the critical design aspect of the end of the building stepping down. So you're seeing a 4-story building really across the site. Similar to the project that was mentioned on 164, that's a 4-story building with a pitched roof. This is a 4-story building with a pitched roof. We'll get into it on the elevations when we get to that, but what we looked to do was, by the time we were starting to slope the grade down, dealing with the accessibility and the site access, we also took that time to then step the building down. So that's why the end condition of the building is 3 stories of residential, but now you're exposing that parking level. So by the term of the end of the building, it is no taller than the rest of the building, because as the grade steps down, you expose that lower level. If we go to the next plan, you're going to see the parking, which, as we mentioned, is able to be driven in directly from the south. And because we had the opportunity to read the report before coming here today, we did a bit of a deeper dive into the enclosed parking layouts, and we looked at some of our design metrics that we've had in place from the start of the project and determined that we can achieve 84 parking stalls within this existing footprint. So we are meeting 1-to-1 parking. Every unit has a parking stall. And coming from the design side, not from the operation side, universally across the senior living spectrum, we're seeing under 75% utilization of parking for independent living. So by meeting 1-to-1, that would be fully utilized on day one when all family members strongly believe that they still need their car. Because on the day you move into independent living, you're driving your car, you're using it. Nobody's going to take that away from you because you are truly independent. After a couple of months or a year, when the dust has collected and your family members are visiting and they start to see that, less cars take up space. So as the building ages, as does the population, as does the car reduction within the footprint of the building, which is where you would also start to see more staff and more support being needed. So the likelihood is those 15 parking stalls on site would be supplemented by the underutilized parking down on the first floor. And we're seeing that not just with Kirkland and their experience, but across the country. On the next slide, so the focus is we did get to 84, but we strongly believe that there would be less than 75% utilization. The typical floor, now this would be floors 2 and 3. You're seeing the full build out. There's the sunrooms and the socialization amenity space in the core of the building. And then the typical floor plate has the 2-bedroom end conditions. And then the next slide, as we step up to the top floor, Mayor, if we could go to the next one. No problem. This is where you're seeing that those units are in fact dropping off. Experientially, it doesn't impact the residents to have the reduction in units in the end, but it does play a part to take into account the grade changes that are being experienced on the site. The next slide, number 14, we care a lot about the resident experience. The architecture is critical. We wanted to make sure that we were showing a quality development, but also making sure we're meeting the amenity needs of the residents. So the courtyards that you're seeing here not only are heavily landscaped from a beautification standpoint, but landscaped to ensure that it's usable green space and becomes an extension of the indoor amenities. So we'll have grill stations, covered pergolas so you can be out in the shade, and then clean green space so we can have classic bocce ball, cornhole. No pickleball. We won't have any large enough pickleballs in this courtyard. But if we go on to the next one, we're going to start to get into the elevations. And as Mary mentioned, we've been back and forth a little bit on how we're measuring height. And I think that's a critical component because we do appreciate that we're non-compliant on several items, but from the standpoint of the overall height, we were looking at it slightly different than the interpretation that Mary and I discussed, where the individual elevations of the building, take for example Ryan Road elevation to the bottom of that page, the width of that building is in fact under 55 feet until you take into account the grade plane. So when you do the average grade plane and you start to look at the end condition where you're dropping off, we do end up being 55 foot 2. So we'd have to accommodate a 2-inch change to make that measurement rectify to 55 feet. As the grade starts to drop off to the left end of the page, you're seeing that that directly aligns with where we stepped that building down. The real challenging elevation based on interpretation of building height is the Quinlan Drive elevation. So on that face, you're seeing the darker form of the building in the true colors, that it's 4 stories in the expression of the underground parking, and then 3 residential floors, and then an attractive gabled roof. That height falls under 55 feet. But because you can see the back elevation where the building steps up to that higher standpoint, that measurement is 63 foot 8. So when we talk about the non-compliance, it is to the height of the building from an end condition, considering the height of the building in the background. Not that I can argue with the letter of the law, I'm just indicating where that non-compliance comes from. We're not trying to put a 5-story building or a 6-story building in a residential neighborhood. We're working with the topography of the existing site to accommodate a 4-story structure, not unlike the height of the new development on 164. And similarly, from an architectural standpoint, not saying that we wanted to do this or it was a plan from the get-go, but had we come in today with a flat roof design, with a parapet to do minor screening of rooftop equipment, we would be well under the maximum height. So we could architecturally change that to a more modern aesthetic to meet the letter of that law. However, we're here with a gabled roof form. And that ties into the screening aspect. It was mentioned in the report that the HVAC locations and screening plans, this is a bathtub roof. So the only rooftop units that would be within this development are for all common spaces. So there is a bathtub that would accommodate that. The rooftop equipment would stand in there and be invisible from any point because it stands within the overall roof form. And then each individual resident unit is serviced by a Magic Pack system. So there's a through-wall grill, and they're all expressed on the elevations. You, interestingly enough, don't see most of them because if we look at the way the floor plans are laid out, all the Magic Packs are turned on the side to ensure that the side elevation of those balconies are expressing the Magic Packs instead of being presented outward initially. So those are some of the items on the elevations that tie into the building height and the screening questions. So I did want to address those. And then I didn't have this in the PowerPoint presentation, but we did have the two elevations of the site signage that are on the site. There is an existing site, which we would be modifying with the more relevant or modern Kirkland Crossing logo, and then a new site that would be on Quinlan site signage that would be another iteration that was built upon the existing sign further down the road. So we do have the two signs on G232 that reflect the two signs that are represented on that site plan. So those pieces of information are in the package. And we'd be more than happy to, as we recognize that we're likely tabling this to move things forward, the items with the fire department, as we mentioned, we've done our best to address them architecturally and civil, but we can get confirmation from that. And then materials. We do have all of these materials handy. We did not specify a color for the shingle on the elevations, but we would be able to offer physical copies of that at the next meeting. So architecturally, I think I hit on all the topics that we wanted to address. I think, Pam, you had a couple of closing comments.
Thanks, Eric, and thank you for allowing me just a few more comments. The last couple of slides, I think, have a couple of the things that did not conform to the elderly housing overlay. One was the 50-50 kind of IL-AL. We've talked about that a little bit, and we'll continue to generate some ideas around that. Eric talked about the building height and our desire to have a really nice design to it and step down the building at the ends, so I won't comment on that one any further. I did want to comment just a little bit on the parking and on the density. We have, as Presbyterian Homes, been in business since 1954, and we have over 57 campuses now, and have found that our use of the underground parking is even less than 75% as a building, even as a building opens, but especially as it starts to age. We do find that the vacant spots, we then offer fobs to family members or to staff that visit the building, or as an employee of the month kind of perk as well. And the campuses have vans, multi-person, like 12-person vans, and we make multiple runs during the week to shopping, whether it's Target or Piggly Wiggly or CVS, to theater events, to appointments, to other things. So there is another mode of transportation that's available for residents, and that is part of what it means to be moving to a senior facility, a senior housing building, is it comes with other programming like that that helps alleviate parking concerns. When we talk about providing floating RCAC licenses where care services could be coming into the building to provide services for people, it's a free choice by people, same as it is for hospice, on who their provider is. They can choose us, they can choose someone else. However, what we find in our buildings is there definitely will be a preferred provider. So typically there is one provider, maybe two, that the residents choose. Fred has Diane that comes every week and helps with this and this. He tells George that she's great. They meet in the hallway. He hires her too. They talk to Mary. She hires them too. And pretty soon that caregiver person is the primary care for bringing in those services. There may be a couple of people and maybe two services, but it just develops that way without any input by us. We don't guide or coach or or limit the residents' choices. But it's kind of like, hey, who's your auto mechanic? Oh, you trust him, I trust him, had good experience with them, same sort of thing. So I'm not concerned at all about multiple caregivers and parking not being available. Also, we find that family members don't come at the same time as caregivers. Speaking from my own experience with my mother, dare I come before she had her visit from her caregiver so that her glasses were on straight and her hair was just so, and she actually had clothes that were facing the right direction. And they want that opportunity to feel put together and proud of the way they look before their family comes. So typically, we see caregivers coming in the early morning, family members midday, and in the evening, perhaps some caregiving then as well. So those hours tend to parking. So we'll work on some definite parking kind of study things, but that's the reasoning of why there aren't more spots. To the issue of density, we understand that we are asking for more than is currently allowed in your ordinance. We tried to be very mindful of the conditions on that last slide of that you look at when you're granting that up to 150%. We tried to be very mindful, meet those, and then go beyond that with exceeding open space, going to an underground stormwater system to filtrate water that would allow us to add more landscaping, shield the building more, soften that corner, provide more screening and habitat. So that's part of our reason for going beyond in those things, is to help offset some of that request, understanding it doesn't directly correlate. We had found that the additional density, it's about choice and affordability. Our mission as a provider is to aim for that affordable to middle market. And with the 84 units, that allows us to offer a variety of apartment layouts and sizes and designs, and allows us to stay focused on our missional goal of moderately priced apartments. We looked at, I'm a rule follower, so we really tried to make 75 work. And it pushed us to such large units that we really got beyond a rent level that we wanted to reach with that middle market and affordable, and also pushed us to larger units where you don't typically see RCAC floating licenses and people that need services wanting that big of an apartment or being able to afford that. So that was part of our reason to drive density, to need a little increase in density. We also have found that buildings are much more than buildings, they're a community, and it takes kind of a synergy of a certain number of units to provide that kind of energy and community and internal support. So the mix of people, the interested activities, kind of that vibrant atmosphere helps make residents more active, gives them more opportunities to interact, provides more of a social support and thwarts isolation. So that kind of mass really helps create and sustain that environment, and this is sort of a magic number for us. So I wanted you to just understand why we were asking for that. We know it's a reach, but did feel that it was important to the core of the way the campus would function. Our objectives are always to provide more choices for senior residents to continue to live in the community that they live in, to really build not just a building, but a community that's got identity and connectivity, to give them independent living with the option for care services as they need it, and to really be mindful of inviting outdoor spaces. One of our design philosophies is that when you walk in the door to almost any of our campuses, when you walk in, you can see through and out the back to large windows and some nature. We really try to bring nature in So paying particular attention to the outdoor spaces and to the placement of windows and trying to bring light in really helps people from a mental health standpoint and from a physical activity standpoint. So we really do spend a lot of time focusing on outdoor spaces and trying to make sure that we help encourage that socialization and activity in people's lives. So just wanted to share those thoughts with you and understand we'll have future conversations. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions or comments from the commission?
One really quick question. Did you say the clubhouse is going to be used by the Phase 1 residents?
So as part of the overall campus, they will be able to go to each other's buildings. Typically, we see in the first month or so that the new building's open, everybody wants to walk over to the new building and see it. And then they're like, yeah, I've been there, I've seen it, I like our club room in our building. So when there's like Christmas things, we'll invite this building over to the main campus to partake in events there, but we don't say you can't go over there. The fitness area, we will link through, this is my weak point, IT stuff, connectivity, so they can be doing a class at the main campus, but they can follow along on the TV on this one and do the same class. My husband's in IT, so I claim a pass on understanding how any of that works. But there'll be connectivity through the magic of technology for that, or they can have their own little classes. So it's not meant for the other campus to come over and exercise there. They have their own.
Just wondering if there's like a skywalk or something would help.
Well, like I didn't see a hair salon there also, and that's what people need, but then I thought about it, you have it at the main building, right? Okay.
Some people need that.
Yeah. Your appointment's tomorrow, Craig?
Every day.
Are there any other questions or comments as it relates to the,
Is there, how's the parking at the main campus, or the main building right now? Is there sufficient and/or excess?
Parking at the main campus, currently, there's more parking spots than we need. One thing I was thinking is we can do a study of counting open parking spots at 8 a.m., at noon, at 5, at 8, and just kind of get a better idea of actually what's open there.
Yeah.
Just so we can see how a building ages.
Yeah, and also see what overflow could do, because if we have plenty of overflow at that, it would make me feel better about the parking here. So
I think that's kind of far away though. A lot of people that visit are bringing things.
Oh yeah, I'm talking.
I mean, I've got
but when you
6
can look at
bags of groceries.
Yeah, but employees or potential employees.
You know, yeah. I see the indoor parking used by employees making more sense than the outdoor, because there are open spots, like she said. All these units will not have people using them, but I can't see visitors usually. I haven't seen them. Maybe a family member using their mother's spot instead of father's.
Would you like a motion to table?
whatever you want to do?
I'd like to make a motion to table this agenda item.
I would second that.
Okay, we have a motion to table. Roll call vote, please.
Okay. Commissioner Grabowski?
Yay.
Commissioner Lang?
Yay.
Commissioner Mance?
Yes.
Commissioner Belt?
Yep.
Trustee Roberts?
Yes.
President Knudsen?
Yes. We'll table this till the next meeting.
It could be longer, right? Because tabling
is an indefinite period of time.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you guys bring it back.
Okay, the next item is,
What was that?
Can I ask a question?
sure, go right ahead.
Just make sure I'm allowed to ask a question. A number of things were presented and discussed, very little determination. So the last comment about until we bring it back, I would typically bring something back with modifications based on feedback. Having not heard much feedback post-presentation, I'm wondering if the comments initially, particularly pertaining to the building height and the parking, if any feelings have changed or if that direction still is in place.
I would have to say that that's probably still in play.
Honestly, your presentation did help clarify it for me personally. I did appreciate that with regard to the height. Are we allowed to provide feedback right now, direct feedback, or what would be the?
Well, the agenda item has been tabled.
Okay.
So I would limit the discussion. I would point the applicants to contact staff, and we've heard the feedback here. We know this commission will provide that direction.
And that's enough of an answer for me. Thank you.
Review, discussion, and possible action on the request of property owner applicant North Shore Bank for sign code waiver to permit a temporary sign exceeding the 15 square foot area limit and the seven consecutive 30 cumulative days per year duration limits as set forth in section 70.111A11 of the village code under 6.68 acre V2 downtown business zoned property located at 104/120 West Wisconsin Avenue. Mary.
Sure. So request simply for a sign code waiver. We do allow temporary signs in the village code, but we have a specific statement in there that says that temporary signs are limited to, I believe it's 7 consecutive and 30 cumulative per year, per property. And what they're proposing to do is display this particular signage in the grassy area of their site on the corner over at Wisconsin Avenue and Oakton from May 15th until August 31st. And the size of the sign also exceeds the limits of the code with respect to temporary signs. It's going to be 7 feet high, which is fine, but it's going to be about 24 feet across in total, which is about 168 square feet. And in the downtown, B2 downtown district, we allow 30 square feet for a freestanding sign, 15 square feet for a temporary sign. So it's in support of a particular Be Kind program that North Shore Bank has adopted, starting back in, I guess, 2020. That's not really critical or germane to the question of whether to approve the temporary sign. It will meet the setback requirements. It'll be about 25 feet back from the sidewalk and about 20 feet away from the existing drive-through area of the bank building on that corner lot. So from a planning standpoint, I don't think that there's really anything to object to here. Does it set a precedent? Probably, to some extent or in some way, but it really does, it does fit on that particular corner. It doesn't encroach on the vision clearance triangle either. So I'll turn it over to the commission to decide.
Tim, you have any comments? Are there any comments from the commission? Yes.
First, I'll just start. I love the idea. Secondly, I don't think it's any, when we're looking for a waiver here, it's not like they're advertising in any sort of way for the bank. I think the signage there is more of an art installation, and it literally is an art installation. It's not particularly a sign. There's, I don't see Be Kind and want to spend my money in North Shore or deposit my money in North Shore Bank. I just see that as more of just a benefit to the community. So I'm all in favor of it. And I don't think in any way it, sets a precedence of signage. If everybody wanted to put up amazing pieces of art, I would love that to be the precedent.
Well, then I think that's a good clarification to include as a part of the motion.
Okay.
It's really not advertising content so much as it is an art display.
Was that your motion?
No, I was just making comments.
Oh,
I can make a
okay. I didn't
motion
know
now
if you
if
were
you guys,
making a
I'll let
motion.
everyone else talk, I mean, do it.
Any other comments or questions?
I'm glad the commissioner brought that up because I think we need to make it clear. We have done that so many meetings with so many different sign requests. We need to make this clear, including in the minutes, that this is not advertising, this is artwork. To differentiate it between other potential sign requests that could be of this size or height. So I think what we clarified it was great. I would support it that.
So there's no differentiation in the code where, because it's not really a sign, they still have to get approval? Just curious,
They do.
because it's,
We needed to find some compartment to drop them into, rather than just let it show up on the landscape and
sure.
find out there are objections.
Only reason, well, and maybe they're not big enough to be out of compliance. My only question is like the Pewaukee stick your face in the bear hole sign by Chocolate Factory. That's kind of a temporary sign. I guess if they pull it in every night, but if it's 7 consecutive days, is that technically out of compliance because of size, right? Nobody's said
We
anything
address it
about
on a complaint basis.
Right.
That's-
Yeah.
This one's going to be 168 square feet of sign,
Correct.
so we thought, well,
Okay,
it's going to be a,
right.
Sorry, computer's room. I'm trying to find the actual. I guess I could just make a motion to approve the proposed signage on the basis that it is not actually signage, but more of an art installation, I should say.
That does not include advertising.
Yeah. It does not include advertising. Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the artwork.
I'll second that.
Oh, we do have, I'm sorry. I thought I heard a second.
No.
No, there was no second.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
there's first and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is hereby carried. Review and discussion, possible action on sign code waiver requests of tenant applicant Janet Diamato, DVA Bernice Benassari, thank you. Salon and Spa to place a wall sign exceeding the 30 square foot area limit set forth in section 70.115D, section 9 of the village code, the 10.96 acre B1 community business zone, property zoned by Society of St. Vincent de Paul. Mary?
right, this is a sign code waiver. It does contain advertising information. And they are requesting approval. They're going to occupy the 5 tenant spaces out of the 7 tenant spaces on the west or south end of the building at St. Vincent de Paul's structure there. They'll be in the middle. There'll be a cleaner on the end and Northwoods Marine on the other end. So each tenant space would ordinarily be allowed 30 square feet of signage. 5 times 30 would be 150. They're asking for 280 square feet. But I would say this too about the design of the sign. Having talked to the applicant and their sign representative a little bit about it, part of the reason why they made the pan of the sign so large is to kind of cover up the unsightliness of the parapet wall that it's being affixed to. There's a lot of schmutz left on that wall from various signs that have been put up and taken down and
Moment of
fading.
silence for all the
and
subways that have gone before.
Yes, right. So, you know, what would be the better option? The better option would be to have the building owner paint the parapet wall for once and for all and get everything back to looking nice again. But that's really not what anybody has offered or is talking about tonight. They're talking about using the sign to cover up as much of the discolorations and whatnot. And from the standpoint of, you know, does it fit within the scale of the parapet wall? I thought the answer, in my opinion, was yes. Northwoods has a 56 square foot sign. nearly 60. They have 2 tenant spaces. So it's a very subjective question. It's a attractively designed sign, fits within the scheme of the parapet wall itself. From my perspective, if the planning commission is inclined toward an approval on this, I would recommend the only condition attached would be the securing of a sign permit prior to placement of the sign at the site. The building itself is set back substantially from Ryan Road, right? So we have many times offered a waiver on account of those situations. Along Capitol, you've done it as well. So I'll turn it over to the commission.
Any questions, comments?
They're taking 5 suites, you said?
Pardon?
There's 5. Okay, so it's about 50-ish per suite, what they're using.
And just to, can I interject one thing? If you take away the pan, if you will, which is going to not only hide the parapet wall, but it also, because it's halo, it's backlit, it's going to be a direct mount application. With that being said, you're looking at probably anywhere from 4 to 8 different screw holes to attach this because it's a halo of backlit, which is extremely good looking and very classy looking sign. With that, you're going to have a lot of destruction to the parapet wall. That's why we did the module or the pan, if you will, because it adds structure to a parapet wall, which is, needs some structure. And also within that pan will house all the electrical. So it's kind of a win-win in my opinion. And it's very appealing.
Any other questions?
I think if you guys have set precedents before, or this board has set precedents before, was particular to that site to allow larger signs due to its setback. With that said, I'm just happy there's someone going in there and making that site making that place lively, and I would have no objections to this as proposed.
No? Does somebody want to make a motion then?
I'll make a motion as written with Mary's request for the sign permit.
Okay.
Citing the hardship of setback from the main road?
Yes. And prior precedent.
Can I just make a comment as the owner?
Yeah.
We're planning on painting the wall. We're not just covering the wall, but we are going to paint the wall to beautify it. We do want to bring some vibrancy back to Lake Country Square. So
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Make sure it gets the colors approved by staff, please. We don't want you to have to come in and repaint, which we just recently had.
Well, we got to talk to this gentleman right here too, this St. Vincent de Paul right there.
The President Knudsen loves blue, so.
Can we also just clarify that last summer, St. Vincent de Paul legally divided that property. They own their building, and we now are acting as Testarossa, Cassinjan and D'Amato. We now own the strip mall portion, and we have a common condominium association to share the responsibility of the parking lot. And so we actually own the strip mall portion of the building that we are putting the Benesaire Salon and Spa Suites into.
Okay.
So there's clarity there so that you guys
Good to know.
know that that
Thank
portion
you.
of the building is not owned by St. Vincent de Paul anymore.
Okay.
Not know that.
Thank you.
Didn't even think to look because it's just always been St. Vincent de Paul.
Go with your strengths.
Second?
I will as soon as.
Just yell it out.
I second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Good luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your patience too tonight. The roads are bad, I heard, so take your time.
And you can stay for the whole thing if you want.
Yeah. I'll go home with you. Okay, next item on the agenda is review, discussion, and possible action on the request of property owner applicant Agape Community Church, Inc. for site amendment approval as to changes proposed related to parking, sidewalk, and patio areas, configuration, as well as dumpster enclosure location and design, the 1.66 acre parcel located at 449 West Wisconsin Avenue, is owned IPF Institutional Public Service District. Mary?
Right. The Planning Commission saw this previously under a slightly different design option, and they have gone back to the drawing board, now returned with some pretty good solutions for the issues that were raised originally. The project is still essentially the same. They're going to expand an asphalt area, the asphalt area of the existing parking lot on the west side of the building, and reconfigure the striping in there. Then they're going to add some parking to the tune of up to 2 vehicles on the east side of the building along Burroughs Drive by developing an eyebrow turnout type drive that enters and exits onto Burroughs Drive.
And what's that for?
That would be for parking of up to 2 cars in there.
Okay.
And then they will also be adding some stairs and patio and concrete type furnishings along the northwest corner of the building and all the way along the north side, extending out to Burroughs Drive to make that a more pedestrian-friendly space so that cemetery goers can get from the main parking lot up some steps down into the cemetery from there. So there are, a few details. They're also adding a dumpster location and enclosure that's no longer out along Burroughs Drive. It's internalized to the site. First of all, with respect to the expansion of the main parking lot to the west, the only thing that I wanted to, identify is the fact that they don't meet the ordinary setback requirement from a public street for the parking lot. But they did double back, since that's a private road that goes into the Glen at Pewaukee Lake. But they did double back and develop a landscaping plan for those couple of spaces, those couple of green spaces that help separate it. And I'm satisfied that for the most part, satisfied with the plantings they've chosen, will at least create some sense of a buffer there. Overall, the percentage of green space in the parking lot still doesn't meet code, but it does improve the current legal nonconforming situation, okay? So they are going to have more green space now than they had under previous conditions in that parking area. They're going to add some pole-mounted lighting. I've reviewed that as with respect to the fixture type and the dispersion plan, and both are fully compliant. It's a cutoff fixture. The mounting height is within that code limit, and they also don't exceed 0.5 on the ground at the lot lines. Overall, the site itself, with all the changes, will still exceed the minimum 35% of green space. They'll be at about 59%. The eyebrow turnout on the east end of the site, entering and exiting from Burroughs Drive. My retaining walls that are included in the plan, they really are just to address the slope of the site. It falls off so kind of dramatically from the church building to the north and then to the south and west. For the most part, those are not in excess of 3 feet in height, and I would view them more as landscaping features than any sort of a structure, really. The new dumpster location is also much improved. Instead of being out in the back along Burroughs Drive by the single-family homes, it's now on the north side of the west parking lot, and it backs up to the cemetery. So they would be essentially building that into the terrain, the space to put that dumpster north of the parking stalls, and then also screening it with a fence. That location doesn't meet the 10-foot setback from the north lot line. So what they're proposing to do is secure an agreement from neighboring property owner, the cemetery to the north, that they will not only hold their own 10-foot offset, but make up the additional shortage that Agape would have on their site. And so as long as that agreement could be brought for our village attorney's review and approval, it would meet the code. The code provides for that the neighbor can approve that excess. So really, with all of that said, I think the cumulative changes at this point are much more in step with the commission's review and the staff comments from the first time you saw this. My recommended conditions would include staff review and approval of the actual fencing plan, what material, what height, that kind of thing, including any associated plantings or screening that would be necessary for the areas around the dumpster and around the HVAC placement area at the northwest of the building. They show a fence going around that square where the HVAC sits, but we don't know what the details of the fence are. Number 2, applicant to replace the spirea plants that are in the landscaping area west of the parking lot to an evergreen type shrub, so we have something there optimistically year-round, and just make sure that it's something that's going to be salt hardy. Condition 3, that the applicant ensure that the space between the east turnout and the public road pavement of Burroughs Drive doesn't eventually become a parking and drive area unto itself because it has no curbing or other protection to protect that from happening. Number 4, the applicant to draft and submit for staff review and approval and recording an easement compensating agreement for the dumpster offset to the north. And that's all I had. Tim?
Sure. The engineer has done a good job to basically maintain the drainage that's on the current parking lot in the same exact pattern, or pretty close to the same exact pattern that in the proposed condition. There is the addition of about 9,000 square feet of hard surface. That doesn't kick it into our stormwater where it needs a pond of any sort. I think at the last meeting, I expressed some concern about, water running obviously off the parking lot now with really not, then it goes down towards West Wisconsin Avenue through the grass. I've considered that, and to be honest with you, to have it sheet flow through the grass is going to be much better than trying to concentrate it into one area that goes down the grass and erodes out down to Wisconsin anyway. That's where the water is always gone, and so they are maintaining that particular pattern at that parking lot. On the Burroughs side, as Mary said, their little eyebrow doesn't have curb on the west side because then that drains off into a little swale that goes to the south. I know there was some concern expressed last time about the house that's to the south where Burroughs makes a 90-degree turn to go to the east. And what they do is they capture that water that's coming off of the so-called eyebrow. As it comes to the south, it's captured in a little swale and a berm, so it kind of deflects it towards the west. And so it'll deflect it away from the house. And it's all shown on their grading plan. I believe that that's adequate, and it'll be a swale there, probably at least a foot swale, to kind of capture that water and just get it moving away from that house potential on that. I think Mary covered really that Burroughs area there. I didn't really have any other comments other than, I agree with Mary on that particular little grass area. Just so it's maintained there, it would be good. It could turn into like a lot of dirt right next to the road, but I don't think the town or the village wants to put curb and gutter on the Burroughs side because we don't have it there now. So I don't think we want to create a little curb island there at least on the public side. If they want to put one on the inside there, on their part, that might be helpful to us.
Here?
Yep. Some kind of a barrier potentially, just so cars don't cut it short on that. Something to keep the cars. Mary was saying posts or reflectors or something that just keeps the cars on the actual pavement. The only other thing about the parking lot, I think Mary mentioned it last time, is they pushed the parking lot way to the west. There's not a lot of queuing space, so as cars leave, there may be other cars in the parking stalls that will not be able to get out right away. And so that's their internal operation. It's not ideal, but on the other hand, whoever parks in those spots are going to have to realize, or they will realize after a while, that there's going to be a queue of cars. It's not going to be a real busy road on that private road through there, but, you know, when you got a whole bunch of cars going, leaving at any one time, it's just going to queue up. So the parking lot may be a little congested at times, but that'll be a short-term delay for those cars in there. Once again, they're creating that internal delay themselves. It'll be on their property, not necessarily on any part of the public road. So they did provide plans and made, they did take care of my comments, so I'm recommending approval of the civil engineering drawings, sheets 1 through 4, prepared by Pinnacle Engineering Group, dated 2/7/23. There weren't any, unless you come up with something, unless there's something, other comments on engineering, I would recommend approval of those plans.
Comments, questions?
Mary, can you help me understand where the retaining walls are?
Sure.
I'm not understanding that.
There's retaining walls here
Okay.
around the dumpster. There are retaining walls here and here and here. There is a retaining wall. I think I got them all.
So at the south end of the
I get 'em all?
parking, because they're bringing the parking lot closer to Wisconsin Avenue. So there's no retaining wall there where they're trying to lift the elevation, and they're just continuing to move it from the grass into the hard surface. Okay, all right, that's why I was wondering if there's a retaining wall down there, or?
That'll be all sheet flow, so we're not going to try to concentrate that water in one spot. Sheet flow through that grass.
Okay.
It'll clean up the water as before it gets to Wisconsin Avenue.
Oh, sorry. Like I said, I was trying to interpret that, and I'm not visualizing it. So
It does that right now. So what it's doing now, it's just going to be the same way, except that parking lot's going to go down
Closer.
further.
Okay.
No curb there on that south side, it just rolls right off the pavement right into the.
On the south side, yeah.
Yeah. Like it does now.
Unless it's something different, then, okay.
No, I was just gonna add, no, you're exactly right. Tony Zanon from Pinnacle Engineering, the civil engineer on the project, and they had it spot on. The walls are exactly where Mary said, and Tim described that parking lot properly.
Any other questions or comments?
No, I think it's great. I think
like
it's
it much better.
Yeah, I think it's the last piece. They've done an amazing job there with the church, kind of by getting this parking lot organized and repaved. I think it's gonna be the last piece on there. I do appreciate the sheet flow through the grass. I mean, that's a great way to filter, as you mentioned, filter the water. I mean, when you're doing water, that's actually an acceptable way to clean the water through there. It's a great filter. So. And as far as the queuing situation, I grew up going to Catholic Mass. Everybody's saying you're in the parking lot afterwards. Like every church.
It happens at every church, yeah.
You get a reset. You go to church. You get a reset. You can go back out and swear at the guy behind you. You know this way. So no concern, and I would approve it as it is.
Just so you know, I would prefer not to do this, and if it was more of a commercial district, I would probably be pretty much against it. You know, we'd always want to have some queuing where there's going to be turning movements in there in a commercial setting.
Yeah.
But this is a little bit different because of this. The use is concentrated.
You're getting to fight someone. You're going to have to face them next Sunday. So in the parking lot. So
The trick is having donuts, keeps people behind.
We just missed the outside of the church being lit up at night. We can't see it across the lakes very well anymore like we used to. It was beautiful.
I have a couple questions. One, Tim, when they plow this, obviously it looks like they're probably going to plow everything to the Wisconsin Avenue side. Is that going to cause any issues with drainage? There'll be a lot more drainage because of the more impervious surface that we're going to have there?
Well, clearly, I mean, when you have more asphalt, there's going to be more impervious surface.
More snow.
So there'll be some more drainage that goes down to the south. Now, the rain that goes down there now hits the grass and continues down right now as it is. So I would say that it's going to act no different, you know, the impervious surface will make the water get down to the south faster, but then you still got a pretty good
green space,
length of grass there to slow it down in the summertime. Winters are, I'll guarantee, I mean, if we have snow and they put some snow there, and then we have a rain like we did a couple weeks ago, you know, where everything's melting and the rain isn't soaking in, it could get a little tricky there as it goes down the hill.
I'm just concerned that, you know, when we get that rain and snow, that if too much water gets down, then it covers the sidewalk becomes solid ice. Of course, they have to maintain it because it's part of the...
Yeah, it'll go across the walk into our curb and then bring down the curb.
And then up on the east side where they have that 2-car parking lot, which I don't understand, but that's all retaining wall. All of that water that's coming off of the concrete behind it and on the parking area there, is there like a lip there? Or does the water just,
Yeah, no.
how will you be plowing that, I guess is my question.
Yeah, for sure. If you recall, last time we were here, we had 4 parking stalls on that side of the parking lot.
Right,
and it was kind of frowned upon because of snowplows potentially dinging it on when they were plowing burrows. So in our process of this is we heard that and changed it, and our design is to push all the water westerly. You'll see there's a slight swale between the asphalt, that little eyebrow and the first retaining wall. So the eyebrow will drain westerly into that swale, and as Tim had mentioned, yep, exactly. And then it'll come down and cross our asphalt path and go into that little swale that we had on the south side of the asphalt path. The north side, that concrete on the far north end, the walkway, all kind of runs to the north and then west like it does today, so that those two aren't intermingled, but they're both staying within our property, so.
I'm just, again, concerned that the properties towards Wisconsin Avenue, if they start picking up more of your water issue and that, it's going to have to revisit this.
If they do it according to the plan, that water is not, the water that's created through the eyebrow and through the swale and everything will stay on their property.
It will, okay.
It's going to be, they actually are going to have a little berm to divert it, and a little swale, kind of a berm and a swale combination to divert that water. They're sensitive to that. As the last plan did not have any of that, so this is a new addition to the plan that actually allows, at least it shows, if we have problems, I can go back and say, do it according to the plan, you know, if they don't grade it right, and say, we want that water to go that way. You know, we want it to kind of shift to the west as it gets kind of past the front of the church.
No, if you're good with it, Tim, I'm good with it.
Okay, great.
Are there any other comments or questions? It's slated, I believe, for action.
I make a motion to approve with the recommendations of the planner
And the engineer.
and the engineer.
Rossi, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve per staff. Any other comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is hereby carried. Good luck. Now we gotta go back up here. Okay, review, discussion, and possible recommendation to village board regarding an amendments to section 4471 of the village code of ordinances regarding transient lodging. Who wants, Matt?
I'll take it. The commission is well versed in this topic at this point, to say the least. So there's not too much in the way of substantive updates for the commission as they make their consideration. For the benefit of those who weren't here at the last meeting, no action was taken because there was obviously not a full board here, but the discussion remains on the number of days for a minimum night stay, and then for the aggregate for the portion of the year. And I guess the one thing that came from the discussion last time was a willingness to look at an ordinance from the town of Holland in Sheboygan County and a couple conditions that they had put in there on their license with respect to either having some sort of geographic requirement for the owner of the property, or if the owner did not live within a certain distance, a designated property manager. So I've included that in the packet, and I just included a brief memorandum summarizing, again, just to, in a more succinct manner, what the licensure procedure that we have drafted provides for in terms of application, renewal, and possible revocation. So really not much has changed substantively. Really, the commission, it's up to you guys to kind of hash it out, and we're here to help you. But you know, the number of nights and that sort of thing, it's a policy decision. That's unfortunately, that's why they pay you the big bucks. So
I'd like to give everybody a chance to speak. I'd like to hold it to 4 minutes per speaker, because I think we've kind of beaten this with nauseam. So Mark, I'll let you start and we'll move right down the line.
Boy, I wrote my notes out here because Jeff said 4 minutes, so I felt I needed to
start the timer in case you need.
Well, our timer's 3,
Our
so.
timer's
Do you want me to get my phone?
There's no 4 minute time.
I did time it. I wrote it, and I'm pretty sure we're pretty close. So I'll kind of hammer through my points here as we go down the line here. Hopefully the DoorDash gets here soon because I'm starving. And some of these things I'm going to say to help bring Commissioner Mance up to speed on some of the discussions we had that she might not have been privy to. So without further ado. Got this. So in 2018, Scott Walker put the Right to Act Rent Act in place to help Wisconsin tourism. Since that time, here are the facts on short-term rentals here in the village. We've had up to 6 short-term rentals operating in the village for various lengths of time. Some of them owned by long-term residents who have served on even boards here in the village. Almost all of them are owned by local residents. The police state that they have 0 calls or complaints about any of the properties over the past 2 years. Once again, that number is 0. The reviews left by the visitors show just how much they contribute to the local economy by going out to eat or shopping in our village. I encourage everyone on the board here, if you haven't done so, please read them, read through the reviews of these properties. It says great things about Pewaukee. We have literally heard nothing about these short-term rentals in spite of being operating for 2+ years, 3 years, until a small contingent on Park Avenue took up the cause. And the one particular house that they're concerned about, some of the people speaking live 9 houses away. That's more than a city block. Once again, we have no documented complaints. We've only heard about hypothetical what-ifs. Currently, the city has 2 hotels. So they end up with all the tourism dollars. Not just for regular travel, but also things like Positively Pewaukee's triathlon, all the soccer and baseball tournaments, and all the things like families coming to towns for funerals or weddings. The city has an 8% occupancy tax. So just last year, Airbnbs alone netted the city $15,000. The village got 0. So let's talk about some of the gray area items, since I felt like those previous things I stated were pretty black and white in facts. As the code is written, these properties, I feel, do fit as a residential manner. The difference in my mind between a long-term and short-term is condition of the property. Short-term rental units, typically spotless and kept up. Flowers are planted, yards are mowed, sidewalks edged. They are judged every week on their appearance. If a tenant in a long-term rental is problematic, it can take months and an act of Congress to move them out. In a short-term rental, the police come in there and can kick them out. It's the difference that way. One item that gets mentioned sometimes is property values and a negative effect on property values. I did research and I looked, and all the studies that come out, there's been a few coming out of different colleges, economics departments, USC, Cal State Northridge, Williams College, all in agreement that areas with Airbnbs actually show an increase in value With the UFC study breaking it down by saying a 1% increase in Airbnb listings led to a 0.018% increase in rental rates and a 0.026% increase in housing prices. Minor, but nonetheless still shows that fact that it's not negative. Finally, we have to respect personal property rights. My lakefront deck literally abuts my neighbor's deck with 0 distance. I mean, I would love to have 10 or 11 feet that was shown out here. I don't. I've got 0. As also for clarification, that Mr. Sheebly's neighbor is not an Airbnb, and he's just saying hypothetically if it was. And hypothetically, if it was, there's no guarantee that the person who moves in there won't be a jerk. He just happens to get along with him right now. Once again, we have to respect personal property rights. There's no guarantee that you're going to like the person you're living 11 feet from. But once again, when you have a house 11 feet from anything, that's what you have to deal with. So since this topic came to us last fall, we had people come and speak for and against. And I believe listening to the community, a compromise can be reached. The current ordinance before us has established a licensing system, by which we can control problematic properties. Once again, the village is required to allow these short-term rentals. So by Wisconsin law, we have to allow, if Mr. Sheebly's neighbor were to have an Airbnb, once again, we have to allow that to happen. So if we're doing that, why do we have to for 6 nights? There's no difference in tenants with that. And if Airbnb neighbors are so terrible, why would we want them there for 6 nights? Why don't we just put them in 3 nights and get them out of there? So I believe 3-night minimum is sufficient to achieve what we were looking for, while still capitalizing on long weekend travelers, families for sport events, or business travelers looking for another option besides a sterile hotel. With regard to the 180-day maximum, we've addressed before, why would we want to restrict this? Our village businesses hurt in the wintertime. Anyone with a 180-day minimum as an owner is going to rent out in the summertime, and we're basically going to, once again, hurt tourism in the wintertime, which is when our businesses are suffering the most. A lot of this was outlined in the letter from Steve at Lake and Pine. And my last point is that lastly, no matter what we decide here tonight, we do need to allow a grace period for restrictions on rental limits to take effect. Most of these places have already been booked out well into the summer. So since we had an out-of-date ordinance on the books and then changed it quickly without allowing a grace period, I believe it would open us up to liability if we were to implement it tomorrow, making them lose out on revenue. So in conclusion, I'm going to play under 4 minutes. We've had short-term rentals here for years, 0 problems. A proposed licensing system seems solid. So let's compromise on 3-night minimum and a no maximum. Thank you. 4 minutes and 33 seconds.
Ryan, did you want to go next, or?
Sure, we'll go down the line. I literally just wrote a couple comments following Commissioner Grabowski's well thought out statement there. I think I admitted in the last session that I've gone completely full spectrum on this. When I first heard it proposed, I thought, oh gosh, I can understand why some of the neighbors would be hesitant to have that. But as I mentioned in previous sessions, I think we've all had the benefit of reflection and frankly the benefit of fact. And I feel, that on a couple fronts I've come all the way back or all the way over to the position of supporting this for a couple reasons. Number one, the opposition that's been represented has been represented by people who really aren't actually neighbors of these properties. And they are putting, some pretty bold assumptions out there about, drugs and violence and children being, taken. And in this situation where we have evidence, facts to support the rentals that are already happening in this community, that just is not happening. Of course, there are the unicorn stories, frankly, some of which were just on the national news of problematic Airbnb properties, but that's just not the fact here. And I don't think people who are looking to cause trouble are going to be choosing a village like this, frankly. Instead, there's only evidence that, some of the commissioners have been able to bring forward of, not only positive experiences, but positive exposure to our community. I think it's something we all want to have. There's only evidence of positive contributions to the community and the local businesses. I mean, it's documented from the attendees great experience at the local restaurants and great experience at the, lakefront, renting a boat, and that's stuff that we want and we're trying to get. I personally have become very fond of Airbnb properties. I take my family there. It's an experience that a family can share, and I think in this type of environment, that's probably what we can expect. I know I'm making an assumption myself, but I think that's the type of experience these properties would have. So he just brought up, Commissioner Grabowski just brought up, the fact that these are businesses. It's almost by definition, in order to attract that client, you're going to be investing in making sure that the property is maintained and it's attractive and it's not going to have overgrown weeds and whatnot. So I'm very strongly opposed to a 6-night, minimum. I think it's intentionally punitive. It's intentionally trying to avoid and allow these property owners to have a viable business and have the attendees or the guests come and have a realistic experience. So my position is strongly a 3-night minimum with no maximum days. And I think our annual license review does allow for problematic properties to be addressed appropriately and swiftly. So that's it.
Brian, I'm going to skip you so you get to both sides, okay?
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Brian?
You've heard my point of view. I will add that the town of Delafield 2 weeks ago just passed a 7-day 181 ordinance. So the city of Delafield, the city of Pewaukee, and the town of Delafield now have the same ordinance to restrict at 6 days and 181. And I've heard for years here that reactiveness is not as good as proactive. So as other communities are being proactive to this issue, I think it is our obligation as a community and as a commission to be proactive and follow suit with other communities as well.
Proactive in what?
In restricting at the 6-day and 181 and passing the similar ordinance to the surrounding communities that already have it, that have recently passed it.
Craig?
Well, again, I'll just end up repeating what I've said in past meetings. To me, this is an issue about land use. And when we talk about land use, we talk about adverse impact or potential adverse impact. I mean, it's a regular, consistent thing we address all the time. I do not believe that this type of use is consistent with residential neighborhoods. However, the state has decided that we are wrong in that. They've decided that's okay. So what we have to do really with the parameters that we have in front of us is how do we address this and still try to potentially avoid some of the adverse impact. And I'm not talking about the ones that are currently there, because as we've talked about before, we haven't heard many issues. The concern is that once this goes into play, what about that next one? And you're right, I feel much better the fact that we do have the licensing process in place, we do have the review of the licensing, we have some parameters set in place that if there is a particular property that's problematic, we can address that. We do have means of doing that. So that's all very helpful to address this. But I'm a realist also. And I know from the past 2 months where we've tried to address this, we have not been able to push the ball very far down the field. And so I understand and I recognize, yes, compromise is going to happen. The reality is that until we have an ordinance on the books, the state statute applies, and the state statute basically doesn't have any of those provisions in it. It doesn't have any restrictions on the number of days, high or low. It doesn't require them to have a license within the village. It doesn't require any kind of review. So basically, we're at more risk by not taking some action than taking action, even if I have to hold my nose when we vote. And I won't really, Jeff. But, so, 2 areas of compromise. One is the length. Again, trying to just be realistic. If we say 181 days, which it allows us to do, or 180, whatever it is, I know when they're going to do it. They're going to do it in the summer. when people are outside and is the most likely time that we're going to have those issues. So whether it's 180 or 365, it's probably the same problem regardless. So I can compromise on that point of going to the 365. But I am still concerned that 3 days is too short. I would compromise it to bring it down to 4 days and let us see what happens. Even at that, I'm a little concerned. I feel with 4 days, you're more likely going to get that kind of that family-oriented kind of a thing rather than the quote-unquote bachelor party sort of a scenario. And again, we talk about property rights, and we've talked about it a lot. Both the people that own their homes and live in them have rights, as well as the people that own these and rent them have rights. And as we know from having to deal with people that are not compliant and the costs from legal concerns, the timelines it takes, because the state does apply tremendous rights to individuals, we have to be very careful that we don't create a scenario where we can't defend against it. And so I would rather be a little more conservative in that approach so we don't run into those legal issues. And if we find that down the road there are no issues, we can always shorten that, but it's going to be hard to push it back up if we don't.
Okay, like Ryan, I was on the fence, and I was really, I agree with the 6 days and the 180, but then the more I thought about it, and the more I heard about the fact that we had quite a few already in the community and have had zero problems, I started to think, well, this is not as big of an issue as I was led to believe. And then I realized or found out that the one on Park Avenue actually has long-term rentals in it, and they were just renting out the bottom part on a 3 or 4 day basis. Well, if I own the property and I have 2 long-term rentals, I'm definitely not going to want somebody in there that's going to cause them to move, because it gets around and then I've got an empty building. So I would think that would be a big starting point as far as, yeah, I'm okay with 3 days with something like that. The one ordinance in here from Holland I thought was very good, except I don't want them 35 miles away. Whoever owns the property, if I'm going to give them a 3-day, 365 rental opportunity, I want them within 5 miles. And if they can't be within 5 miles, I want somebody that can shut that down right now, so I want to land somebody that's going to be in control of it within 5 miles. I think it does, to the point of, I think it does bring in a lot of good to the community. If we had a lot of complaints, I'd be going the other way, definitely. But I haven't heard any. As far as the city goes and Delafield, they have hotels and motels and we don't. So we're kind of like the odd person out. If I had a motel sitting over there on Ryan Road, I'd probably be thinking different, or something like that is renting out all the time. I got a chance to stay in a bed and breakfast, which this, to me, the one that has the long-term rentals in the building, is very similar. They've got somebody there that's watching over it. So my idea is the 365, 3 days, but I want somebody that's within a 5-mile radius of that home or property that can be called 24/7 if there's an issue, and the issue will be taken care of. Again, I like the idea of these being licensed, because if we do have an issue, we shut them down, and they're done. They don't come back.
I think we talked about it last meeting too, and Trustee, I forget who brought it up. Craig, you did about the big companies coming in. I don't want big companies coming in and, buying these properties and turning them into Airbnb. So definitely, I like the fact that there are a lot of local residents doing this. And that also helps create a better experience for the people who come here. Because they're giving them local flavor. So I would be all in favor of a property owner or property manager within 5 miles, within 5 miles of the, if we want to put that in there.
Cheryl, do you have enough there to make a comment?
I think I do, and I may need help from our attorney, please. Well, one thing which maybe you've talked about, but what I seem to have missed, is there a minimum age requirement for at least one of the occupants?
There is not.
I would like to see something like that if it would be possible, because I was formerly an elected official in the town of Brookfield, and the issues we had at a motel there. I don't want us to possibly have this, and I think it probably wouldn't happen, but I want to try and get everything into it possible now so we don't, where somebody 19 years old would rent it and then have younger people. Is there any way we could put some minimum age requirement?
So the only issue I have with that is the state does have a tourist house license, which also regulates this area. And I don't know off the top of my head, they may have a standard in there for a minimum age to be able to rent like a hotel room or an Airbnb or something like that. And if we put something in our ordinance that conflicts with that and is more restrictive, that's going to run into an issue. Sitting here today, I don't know if that exists. I think it does. But let's say the state's standard is you have to be 18 to rent a room, and we say you have to be 25, that's going to be a conflict that we can't be more restrictive.
If it's not the parents.
I think anything if we want to have a standard like that, I think we have to make sure that it's not in conflict with the state standard. So.
Could we do something about it today and revisit it to look at that age issue down the road by any chance?
Well, you could put an age, could you put an age limit on it and supersede it by state statute? So say 21, but if the state statute says 18, it defers to state statute, just so we can get it.
Yeah.
So you can get it moving tonight?
That's what I'm trying to look at.
I mean, you could do it that way.
Age limit on state statute unless none exists, and then 21.
I'd rather
Or
have it like
25,
25, because I don't want to see, which happens, trust me, a 19-year-old renting out and, the brothers, 17, 16-year-old buddies come in, and you know what I mean? I'm trying to restrict things.
No, I understand
If
the
there's any
concern.
possible way we could address something like that.
I guess the issue I have is that's not normally how we make recommendations to the village board. I mean, we don't do a lot of conditional recommendations.
But a lot of
And I think that would be
hotels-
problematic.
And I think it would be.
It'd be problematic at the board level.
It would,
Yeah.
yes.
There are hotels or even vehicles that you rent that there are age minimum.
There are. What I'm saying is that's set at the state level. And if we put something in conflict with that, that's going to cause an issue with our ordinance.
So is there some wording we could put in unless it's in conflict with the state?
That sort of conditional recommendation, I think, is problematic. So rather than rush it through with that would have to be something we'd have to look into. If that's a condition you want to put on.
It was a thought of mine if we could possibly get that in. Okay.
If it helps you out, Airbnb, the popular sites, which this is mostly rented through, have a requirement of a minimum 18.
I kind of have a problem personally with 18, but if we can't.
There's not many
what I'm
18-year-olds
talking about?
doing it, but I understand, I get you, yeah.
Okay.
But and once again, too, with the license, if now, unlike a hotel that kind of, their hands are a lot more tied,
Right.
about an 18-year-old comes in there and pays the money, they basically, they can't refuse service.
Right.
These landlords can refuse like a tenant, pretty much for whatever reason, so if, I would venture to guess that most Airbnb owners, especially at the cost of it, and at a minimum of 3 nights aren't, they're looking for a little different class.
Well,
So
yeah,
that does help out a lot
exactly.
in that term.
It's gonna be likely that the 17 or 16-year-olds or 18-year-olds are gonna trash a place versus,
Yeah.
I would hope that the owners would try and.
When I was 18 and looking for, when I was 18 and looking for a place to party, I could barely scrape together $69 to go to the Motel 6 to party with my friends. I don't think they're coming up with $400 a night.
To go to the Village of Pewaukee.
Yeah, but hey, a lot of these kids could have.
Going, Cheryl.
Yeah.
All right, here's some other thoughts. I like Jeff's suggestion where an owner or a manager that could be on site within 30 minutes would have to be within 5 miles.
Yeah, 5 miles would be less than 30.
Minutes, let's
Yeah.
say, whatever, I don't know.
And 24/7.
Yeah, exactly. And I've lived since 2005 overlooking Park Avenue, where there's a lot of activity evenings. I've had to call the police on somebody below me before, and they actually did find underage drinkers when the police came there. I would highly just make a point to recommend to the neighbors that if we allow a maximum of 3 citations. So just keep that in mind. If it's really disturbing behavior, loud behavior, at midnight they're shooting the bottles in the recycle bin and they're screaming and the music's blasting. That's the time to call the police. Do that, okay? So I think that 3 citation thing in here is very helpful. So based on that, I think I could live with the 3-night owner or manager, somebody within 5 miles that could be there within 30 minutes.
Do you have a cap on the number of days?
I really prefer the 6, but I could live with the 3.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think there was
180 to 365.
Yeah. So like,
In terms of total in the year.
In the wintertime, we used to have the lake, ice over the lake for periods of time. There'd be more people around then, but other than that, there aren't. So I don't have a problem with either amount of days.
I'll make a motion if anyone else has any comments.
To do what?
I'd like to make a motion. To make a motion as presented with the following changes. Changing the minimum nights to 3 nights, eliminating the maximum, and adding language to the licensure that a owner or property manager must reside within, or must
reside within 5 miles.
Must reside within 5
and
miles.
available 7/24.
Available
Or
24/7.
24/7.
Be within 30 minutes.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd need on that?
So is the requirement 5 miles? Is it 30 minutes? Is it
5 miles.
5 miles?
Yeah.
Okay. That's sufficient for me.
Do I have a second? Is there any more to it, or that's it?
did we get everything?
I believe we got.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? Could we do a roll call vote?
Yep.
Jenny?
Commissioner Grabowski,
Yes.
Commissioner Lang,
Yes.
Commissioner Mance,
Yes.
Trustee Commissioner Belt,
No.
Trustee Roberts,
No.
and President Knudsen.
Yes. Okay, due to the late hour, and I think we're starting to get a little punchy here, can we put off the review and discussion on the density till the next meeting? Is that okay with you?
Yes, unless we really hurt Mary's feelings for.
She can't wait to get home herself. Okay, item 7 is citizen comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to share their opinions with commission members on any topic they choose. However, due to Wisconsin open meeting laws, the commission is not able to answer questions or respond to your comments. All comments should be directed to the commission. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Speakers are asked to use the podium and state their name and address for the record. Is there anybody here that would like to make a comment at this time? No? Okay, then item 8 is adjournment.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. I just about ran out of juice. I believe we have to go for a public hearing on this.